Hello and welcome back to day two of JIRN's 2025 virtual conference. My name is Jason Trask. I am the project lead for JIRN's State Justice Statistics TTA program. It is my pleasure now to welcome our moderator for our first panel, Sarah Finneran. Sarah is a former Iowa SAC director, and now she is the research director of the Iowa Department of Corrections with oversight of the department's research and analytics team. Her team conducts data system oversight, data analytics, policy analysis, fiscal analysis, program evaluation, and forecasting. Recently, the research team has expanded their work into analytical visualization, predictive analytics to better equip the field with the technology and tools to promote community and institutional safety. With that, I'll turn things over to Sarah.
Hey everybody, good afternoon. Sarah Finneran with the Iowa Department of Corrections. Like Jason mentioned, I'm a former SAC director, so it's nice to see so many familiar names and faces. I'll be your moderator for this session. So this session will give participants a comprehensive overview of BJS's current corrections data collections, reports, and data tools. BJS's unit chiefs, Rich Kluko and Todd Minton, will cover the calendar of annual and periodic data collections, upcoming reports, and provide detailed instructions on how to access and utilize BJS's corrections data using a range of data tools from BJS's website. Dr. Rich Kluko is a chief of the Prison Corrections Statistics Unit at the Bureau of Justice Statistics. His team is responsible for data collections on correctional populations in the United States, including the National Prisoner Statistic Program, Census of Correctional Facilities, and the Survey of Prison Inmates. Prior to working at BJS, Dr. Kluko managed research at the Colorado Department of Corrections. Rich holds a master's degree in sociology from Colorado State University and a doctorate in social work from the University of Southern California. I'd also like to welcome Todd Minton. He is the Jails and Community Corrections Statistic Unit Chief for the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Todd has worked as a statistician for over 25 years, providing expertise to BJS, the U.S. Department of Justice, and the U.S. federal statistical systems on topics related to jails and the measurement of demographic characteristics of inmates held in local and Indian County jails. Todd oversees a team of statisticians with a portfolio of data collections, including the survey of inmates in local jails, census of jails, annual survey of jails in Indian County, and the annual probation survey and the annual parole survey. Todd holds an MS in criminal justice with a specialization in corrections from the University of Baltimore and a BA in criminology and criminal justice from the University of Maryland, College Park. So nice to have you both. I will turn over the mic to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you, Jason, and everyone for having us here today. I'm Rich Kluko, just in case, we're both in the same room. I'm Rich, this is Todd, and we're really thrilled to be able to share. All right, great. Well, like I said, I'm Rich Kluko, this is Todd Minton. We are happy to talk to you today about the corrections programs in the Department of Justice and the Bureau of Justice Statistics. We are the national leader in corrections data collection and analysis. We have that position as the statistical agency for the Department of Justice, in which we're tasked with collecting and disseminating criminal justice data to the field, to policymakers, to practitioners, to the people served in the community and in these systems. We provide the statistical information on adult as well as juvenile correction systems. It's a large continuum or section of the criminal justice funnel that Todd and I's teams work with. Specifically, we collect information on individuals who are in prisons, in jails, in probation and parole, so community corrections, as well as recidivism of individuals leaving each of those types of settings. The work that we do helps to inform policymaking, operations, and understanding of correctional trends. And having been in the States at Colorado, I recall how much we look forward to BJS's reports being released in order to have some kind of benchmark to look at the national perspective and to be able to see how our individual states are doing in relation to national and regional trends. Furthermore, this work that we do supports evidence-based practices across the federal, state, and local jurisdictions, both in the data that is provided, presented, and analyzed, but then also importantly, the data that's made available to you, the public. These are publicly funded collections, it's taxpayer dollars, and the data in almost every case, as we're able to, it's made available so that additional and secondary research can be done. And that really amplifies the ability for the work that we do to be useful in the field. And so we will definitely communicate and show further on in this presentation how to access that data. But we're also wanting to show you the things that we do, the reports, the collections, the data tools, and the various ways that we try to serve you with the data that we collect from many of you, but across the country. So clearly, it's a large job to do that, and it takes a number of dedicated statisticians to collect this information. This is our Statistical Collections Division contact chart. You can see a more defined org chart on our website if you're interested in the chain of command. But really, this is a group of individuals who have worked for decades, and that was one of the great joys of joining BJS, was getting to work with the people whose publications I'd relied on for so long, and to be able to help support in that collection process. But every single one of these individuals you see here is responsible for one, two, sometimes more national level data collections, and all the associated work that goes into managing the agreements and analyzing data and writing reports. So there's no way we could do what we do without these individuals. So let's get into our program overview a little bit. So the first thing I want to describe today is our annual data collections. So these are really the core of what our units work on year in and year out. The typical reference date for these are calendar year, January 1st through December 30th. There's a couple that are slightly off that based on a federal calendar year or in some cases based on a mid-year count, where we know often our populations are at their maximum level in the middle of the summer. But all these are collected on an annual basis and reported as such. So there's the Census of Jail Inmates, which is a more recent annual data collection. Todd may share a little bit more about that thought process and why and how that is done that way. We also have the annual survey of jails in Indian country, a survey of sexual victimization that's done both in prisons and in jails. The National Prison Statistics Program, which goes out to the 50 states and to the federal BOP to collect information on incarcerated populations, admissions and releases, a degree of offense types, and whether they're sentenced to a year or more. These really provide the anchors for us to be able to see the changes in our prison population year to year. And closely tied to that is our National Corrections Reporting Program, where 30 plus states provide individual level data to BJS on those that are in their systems, and which is really critical to us being able to calculate national recidivism statistics. This importantly allows us, as you guys know, there's many people who come in and out of a correctional institution throughout the year. Something that's not necessarily caught in static snapshots of the population. So having an individual file where we have identifiers all closely protected and behind BJS and DOJ's firewall, but allows us to create term records where you can see how people are doing, moving in and out, and what type of success they're having, or what kind of areas that they need greater support in. And one of the things too that I'd love for us to get into a little bit more is our efforts to collect and connect data sets, realizing that none of these exists in a vacuum, that they're all directly interrelated and linked with one another. And so the way that we're able to track people and to be able to track their outcomes throughout this continuum is when we have personal identifiers that we're able to link. And we'll describe a little bit more when we get into some of the reports that are coming up, some of the really exciting outcomes and partnerships and abilities that we've been able to leverage from multiple data sets. So there's also capital punishment, very importantly, collecting the number of individuals that are sentenced to death, on sentence of death, and then the various outcomes for reasons that they exit their sentence. We also collect annual surveys of probation and parole, and the Federal Justice Statistics Program. This is not all of them, but these are some of the key ones that we work on an annual basis. So I just want to reiterate that collecting information at a national level is difficult, and it requires an enormous amount of engagement with stakeholders and data providers and respondents, and then also an enormous amount of time in data quality follow-up, and then figuring out what to do with missing data, figuring out how to estimate and to truly be able to present national statistics, and all that takes time. So there's cleaning, there's processing, there's coding, then there's analyzing, and then we write the reports, and then we make the reports and the data available as closely in time as possible. And then we push the data out as data tools. So all that process can take anywhere between, I don't know, 8 to 18 months, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So almost a year and a half to get to when we close the data set collection to when we're able to then provide the reports. So moving on.
Let's keep that one back real quick.
Sure.
Just to add on to the sensitive jail inmates, what you don't see on that list is our annual survey of jails. Up until 2023, that was a sample-based survey that went to about a third of the jails nationwide. In between our census of jails that was conducted every 5 to 6 years since the 70s and the 80s. We decided a few years ago that we're moving to the census of jail model, so we are doing enumeration every year. And so in 2024, we had our census of jails, and we're now in the field in 2025. That data collection also gives us opportunities to collect on some more specialty items. For example, in 2024, we collected on opioid disorder. We collect on treatment for opioids and some other programs that the jails offer either on or off facility grounds. We did that in 2019, and so we'll be able to compare those 2 years and see what has changed. And then at jails in Indian Country, the census of jails in ASJ are local jails, your city and county, and then the jails in Indian Country goes to those BIA-owned and operated facilities and other tribal facilities, about 80 of them nationwide. In addition to our annual collection, we also have periodic data collections, some every 5, 6 years, some a bit longer. The National Inmate Survey is one of the newer ones of all these data collections here. That's part of our PREA-related data collection, so we can meet our mandate to collect on incidence and prevalence of sexual assault in correctional facilities. So that's a sample survey where, as part of the sample is there has to be a prison and a jail from each state. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's the data that we are collecting where we're inside the facility interviewing inmates with the ACASI survey instrument, getting on sexual victimization and some of the demographic information as well. And a much broader data collection is the survey of inmates in local jails. And we have been doing that since probably about 40 years now. But the last one was conducted in 2002 until more recently. We just finished a collection several months ago. And so we're in the midst now of analyzing data, cleaning the data in hopes to have several years of publications coming from that. And that data collection it's broad, scratch the surface where we're getting at the criminal histories of those that are confined, their demographics, recidivism, if any medical or mental health issues they have had in the past or currently, if they've received any treatment for those, as well as getting into some of the socioeconomic status of those individuals. and if they're involved in the other programs, education while incarcerated, as well as if they violate any rules, major or minor, while confined in jail. And similarly is the survey of prison inmates. That's the sister collection of the SILJ. For the most part, it's collecting on the same amount of data. And we collected, the last collection was in 2016, and we had a number of reports. If you go on the website, and we'll visit that later on in the presentation. A lot of reports dedicated to mental health, medical disabilities, use of firearm, possession or use during their controlled offense, employment history, a plethora of information that we can pull from that data collection and produce reports or statistical tables or just some briefs on it. And to get that information out there that's useful to the stakeholders. And then our census, and when SPY coming back out? The next one.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. So SPY 2016, even though, it's a long time ago, one of the smart things that BJS in concert with stakeholders did was determine the importance of asking if we could link data after someone has had an interview to see how they do on their trajectories out of prison and back into the community. We asked for a 5-year consent period to continue to collect and to link to other data sets that are collected by different agencies. And so for one example, what we are able to do is link the survey of prison inmates with subsequent years of NCRP, the National Corrections Reporting Program, and to be able to see for those who were released after 2016, after we had our interviews, what kind of outcomes did they have in the community? Were they able to secure employment? What kind of social safety net services did they use or didn't use? And what kind of outcome did they have? Did they recidivate? Did they successfully end their term of supervision? So we're able to get at all that really interesting what happened, not just what is, but what happened by linking these data together. So we'll dig in a little bit more on that. But Todd's point about the census correctional facilities is a good one too. That's one that just came out of the field. And we have the capacity to report at the facility level on a whole host of characteristics, including access to educational services. And one of the interesting additions to that survey this year was asking about access to digital technology services. I know a lot of jurisdictions are leaning into the ability of using video and virtual visiting to be able to use digital technology to participate in higher education, faith groups, and to be able to connect with families. So we'll be able to report on the availability of those services at a facility level and we're going to roll it up, obviously, to state and federal, because that's another one of the elements we take the confidentiality of our respondents and the data that they provide us very seriously and provide it in a way that can allow for national estimation and comparison, but without singling out or pointing out any individuals for the work that they're striving to do. Anything more? Carry on. Okay. So let's get into a little bit to some of the proposed publications. And so these are some reports that are on the tail end now of 2025 and then going into 2026. These are not all, but these are some of the ones that we wanted to just put up there because we thought it would be of interest to this audience. We have Prisoners in 2023, which is about to clear and be released. We'll follow that with Prisoners in 2024, Capital Punishment in 2024. We also collect data on present on data that's collected and provided to us by the BOP on federal prison statistics collected under the First Step Act. That Census of Correctional Facilities report that I just described a little bit is also going to be coming out in the next calendar year. And here's some of the data linkage reports that I was describing. So, for example, we'll be able to look at examining recidivism of persons released from prison using risk factors from the survey of prison inmates, 2016 to 2020. So if you recall, 2016 is when we did the interview. We were able to follow in the administrative records for 4 years subsequently, and then to be able to compare the rates of recidivism for individuals of a wide array of interesting categories to be able to see what characteristics could contribute or influence outcomes. And so that's a report that has been reviewed, written, and will be released very soon. Similarly, with the multivariate recidiv analysis of persons released from state prisons, this one is using just the administrative records that we collect and that you members of the community contribute to BJS. And that's going to be an update of a report that widely cited and utilized looking at the recidivism patterns of individuals released. And then finally, also, we have state expenditures on adult correctional facilities. We collect information or receive it from the Census Bureau on states' budgets. And so we're able to categorize various criminal justice related categories. And so you can see how states compare historically, how states compare to one another, to the national average on things like number of correctional employees, or the amount of funds that are spent on correctional employees or on police protection or on other justice functions, which is useful if you're trying to do, some ROI analysis or other types of, we know that our budgets are our moral documents that document what we spend on and how we promote community safety. And so some of those data are available for you to look at in our tools. And we'll take a look at some of these later in more detail. Todd?
Yeah, on the jail side, we have some upcoming reports, some coming out relatively soon, as well as ones that are planned in 2026. And this is just a partial list, but the preliminary data release. And so over the last couple of years, we're making an effort that we can get some of our data out more quickly. And so this is an attempt, and it's succeeded so far to get some of the high-level data out from our jail inmate series. That jail inmate series is the combination of the annual survey jails and the census of jails, depending on the year. And so, and that allows us to get those high-level numbers out while we're working on the jail inmate series in 2024. I think the preliminary is going to be out probably in the next month or so. And then we're hoping by the end of the year, potentially the beginning of the year, to get out the 2024 statistical tables as a web release. This would be the second year where we did a web release. It's a bit more interactive than just having a PDF form. And so it gives opportunities for folks to look at it, at the graphs, as well as kind of, pick some tables and do some exploring themselves with that piece. Jails in Indian Country 2024, we're hoping to get out next month. And so this is again based on about the 80 tribal facilities, both BIA and those that are owned operated by the tribe. We've been releasing this report since 1998. It's an annual data collection, and we try to get the report out before we get out in the field for the next data collection. And so this is not only important for stakeholders, the PIA, and for us, but it also, we have a mandate from the Tribal Law and Order Act to enhance our data collection initiatives on tribal lands. And so this fits part of that portfolio to adhere to that, the Tribal Law and Order Act. The opioid report. And so this comes from our Census of Jails 2019 and the current one that we are analyzing the data now from 2024. And so this will get at things such as screening and treatment practices and all the jails nationwide, the 3,000 plus city and county jails. It looks at missions and rates of positive testing, screenings, the prevalence of jail admissions receiving medicated opioid treatment, either on or off facility grounds, and as well as the population receiving medication treatment for withdrawal and disorder as well. And so we're planning for a 2026 release, hopefully in the first or second quarter. And then the survey inmates in local jails redesign and pretest, that was actually released in 2025. And so that was a report that was put together regarding our R&D work that we did on redesigning the SILJ, the survey of inmates in local jails. I mentioned earlier that the last time we conducted it was in 2002, so over 20 years later. Typically, we would do this collection every 5 to 6 years. A couple reasons why it's taken a bit longer. It's a very expensive data collection. When PREA-related data collections are now being conducted, like the National Inmate Survey, where we're collecting on sexual victimization, we have to make sure that we're not in the field as too close to one another, because it's a very burdensome data collections where we're physically going in and interviewing the inmates. And so, you know, the number one thing for the prisons and jails is safety and security. So we're very conscious of not overly burdening the facilities, because it is SILJ is a voluntary survey. And so we've typically had very high response rates. And we get a lot of data out of that. We get a lot of publications out of that, including the profile of jail inmates. This report will be the first from the SILJ data collection, hopefully in the beginning of next year. This one will focus more on surface level information on the criminal justice status, or criminal histories and conviction status. We'll go into firearms and possessions and victim offender relationship. We're also looking at something we haven't produced before, is access to legal counsel for those that are confined in those local jails. And we're also going to talk about substance abuse history and treatment, medical and mental health and learning disabilities, as well as their employment and housing characteristic background prior to incarceration, and maybe find some information on family background and living standards while growing up prior to the incarceration. And then, go ahead.
So just to add in as well, so
Yeah.
one of the cool things with these surveys, these individual level surveys where we go in and sit across, field respondents sit across from an individual and go through a full interview process to find out a whole variety of characteristics about them and their experience, and how they, you know, got to prison, how they committed the crime that they did, a various number of factors surrounding that. Something that we've, and as Todd mentioned, sorry, I don't know why I said Ted twice. As Todd mentioned, it's very burdensome. And so what we experimented with the Survey of Prison Inmates Research and Development project over the past 2 years was whether we are able to come in and get sufficient comparable and usable data virtually with a tablet or with a laptop or some kind of interface where an interviewer can connect with an incarcerated person and go through the full battery of questions, and to do it virtually, not face to face. So we have that field test has wrapped up, and we're in the process of analyzing and writing up that report, and hope to have that in the field, hope to have that released in the next couple of months into next year as well. But that could have dramatic impact on how we conduct our individual level data collections, and the constellation of options that we might have to provide our respondents to say what's the easiest way for us to come in and connect with this, you know, this random sample of individuals. Over and above that as well, it enables facilities who may have people in different areas or at different levels and availability, who typically in the past couldn't be there for a face-to-face interview, that if you could pass them a tablet, or if you could hook into the system in the prison already, would have the capacity to have a even easier way of collecting information, as soon as we're able to just distinguish and determine, to make sure that the data that we collect from that isn't biased, or isn't incomplete, or and can serve that function. So that's one of the exciting R&D efforts that we're excited to be able to share with the field, as you're thinking through how you want to conduct and use research in the future.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, we're constantly doing R&D work, especially on these kind of inmate-related surveys, trying to reduce burden and cost. Because we want to keep those data collections around. One significant point to make is, unlike the administrative surveys, these inmate surveys where we're doing interviews, both in NIS, SLJ, and SPY, it's getting at their experience. We can't get that from administrative records.
Right.
And so this is the opportunity where we can go in there. It used to be every 5 to 6 years. I think we're more in a 10-year plan for these big data collections, but it is an opportunity for us to do a profile of the prison and jail inmates. Okay.
So keeping an eye on time, we're at 1:34 now, so we'll
Okay.
go through these next two quick and then get to the tools.
Yeah, I'll do this one real quick. And so then in our community corrections, our probation and parole in the US in 23, that's going to come out really soon. And then in 2024, the beginning of the year, we're starting to catch up and be able to disseminate some of these products more quickly. But this gets at obviously our parole and probation population. And that population is, the largest between that prison and jails. And then correctional populations in the United States, as we refer to as CorePop, it takes a kind of a snapshot, a picture of our jail, prison, and community corrections populations, and we disseminate a report on that. And so that 23 report hopefully will be coming out pretty soon, and then 24 probably mid next year, hopefully. You can go.
Probation and parole, and then
Yeah.
and then a whole array of sexual victimization reports
Yeah.
that you'll be able to these are listed on our publication calendar on our website. But we wanted to save some time to share some data tools. So I'm going to switch rather than going back and forth between the PowerPoint. I want to instead share the website. Okay, good. It didn't mute me this time. Let's get rid of this. Nope. Okay. Cool. Can you guys see this okay? I hope you can. Let me push this up here. All right. So this here is the BJS website, obviously. We're gonna just go straight to corrections here. This is where you're able to find the different collections we described. So let's say, for example, you wanted to look at the National Prisoner Statistics Program. You're able to come in here and you're able to take a look at the methodology, at all the questionnaires historically that have been used to collect that information. You're able to see the related publications and products that were as a result of those collections. And of course, on each of these pages, you'll have the same links. You'll be able to see the same instruments, the same things that you have there. Data and documentation, we'll go through this a little bit later, but here's the capacity for you to go download the data sets yourself at the National Criminal Justice Archive. But let me take you into one of our tools. So in addition to the reports and the data that we provide, we also are trying to be more user-centric in providing data tools that allow for analysis that is more ad hoc, that's more specified to what you're interested in rather than just a big macro national level statistics, which that's what we tend to publish. So for example, you could get our typical requested figures here, and you're able to select the data years that of interest. You can see it in a map format, or if you're wanting to go into a little bit deeper, you could select something like our advanced query, and here you have the capacity to kind of build your data set that you're interested in, or build your tables and figures that you're interested in. Let's say you're interested in national characteristics of the year-end population, all male and female, and let's just say we're interested at age of admission. Well, let's look at highest level of education. And then if we wanted to, let's just say type of prison admission. and then submit. So that would pull that data up for you to be able to see at this level. It's only at the national level. It's not made available at the jurisdiction. So you can select and submit as you're interested in to be able to break that out in the jurisdiction notes. Or you're able to connect to the jurisdiction notes to help you understand some of the minutia of the data. So fortunately, at each of these levels, you're able to export to Excel. And typically we get this data refreshed shortly after when we receive it. We have 2 years of data that are currently being processed at the moment, and hoping to have that available very soon. And then the plan is to have that set to such a way that we can have all our various ways of providing the data to stakeholders updated at the same time with all the data. That's our mission, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So that's the CSAT prisoners tool. Let's see if I can move this slide control. Here's slide. Here's an example of the Survey of Prison Inmates data analysis tool. So this is using the population that we collected in that 2016 individual level survey. And this enables you to create crosstabs of individuals in that collection. Let's take a look at, there we go, view custom charts. And you see that will enable you to create some custom graphics and visualizations very quickly that can array a whole wide variety of different elements. I saw a question in the chat that asked about whether or not we did parental, those who had parents. So if I take demographic, which one is that going to be under? Socioeconomic characteristics. Here we go, parent of a minor child. So you'd be able to see here at 2016, 48% of state and federal prisoners self-reported that they were a parent of at least one minor child.
There's a paper report on it.
Yeah, there's a paper report on it too. And you can see you can break it out by male and females. You see that mothers are more represented in the population than fathers. And you can break it out by race, ethnicity. And so, as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can dice this data up, and we've made this available to you to be able to do that. Moving along, let's take a look. Todd, do you want to share the probation data?
You want to do the thing?
Okay.
We also have a data dashboard probation and a separate one for parole. So I'll go a little bit over the probation. And so similar to the other data dashboards, it's customizable stuff where you create your own tables and maps, and you can export the tables as well. For example, on a lot of our pages, let's see. Let's go right here. I need to move this. I'm going to minimize. You minimize it. Thanks. Okay, there you go. Right here, where you can download the data in different formats, PDF and a PowerPoint, as well as into a Tableau workbook. And so you can, I'm sorry?
And Excel.
In Excel, yeah, it's up there. And so, you can custom view and save some of the selected jurisdictions across the years. And so, let's go back up. And so we can do national level comparison as well as state level, do maps. There you go. You can hover over each of the individual states to see their current probation population as well. And this data goes back, for the most part, it goes back to 1994, not for every variable in the dashboard, because we've made changes over the years, but it does go back to 1994, mainly for some of the top level information that you can explore and do some trend analyses. Let's go back. Yeah, this is,
Different tools.
yeah, thank you. Usually use a mouse.
Anything more you want? I'll drive for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's
Characteristics.
let's look at some of the characteristic stuff. And so this is where we can get at the characteristics of the probation population by sex and race as well, most serious offense and their status of offense. We can select some, go ahead and just select a few. We can kind of similar to the other data dashboards, and up pops a table. And again, you can customize it. You can download it in different formats all the way back to 1994. Some of the measures like race and Hispanicity is 2001 through the current, and everything else is before 2000 is the race. Most serious offense dates back to 2007. So we do have quite a bit of years that you can compare that data as well. Both at the national and at the state level. And we can look at exits and entries, why when are they coming in, how are they leaving? They leaving because they died while on probation. Did they get released? Were they incarcerated? Were they sent to jail or back to prison as well? Supervision rates. And grab that resources block top right. And this is a good little resource to look at. And a lot of our, states, they report a little differently, and sometimes they have exclusionary statements, or they want to let us know that the data is not comparable to the previous years. And so we include this in our reports as well as in the data dashboard, some of the jurisdiction notes. That's the federal, if you want to pick a state, give you an idea. And so we get some detail and why things, if we see some drastic changes, there might be some detail there that explains it. Sometimes they change the way that they're reporting the data. And so we want to acknowledge that because both the probation and parole population can change. And from state to state, we want to be able to dissect if it's a true change or is it potentially a change because of their way of measuring their populations.
So we have a similar dashboard for parole, but moving on just in case, so we have time to have questions if there are a couple. Just want to take you guys back to our website just to remind you you're able to subscribe to our Just Stats. That'll give you the publications as soon as they're publicly available. You're also able to search here. You can also ask questions of VJS using the Ask VJS question. And then finally, I just wanted to also point you to where you can come to in order to find data. And this is really one of the major keys to what we're doing and why we're doing it and making it available to anyone who needs it. So the National Archive of Criminal Justice Data is where those data collections reside. You have the ability to scroll, to find, to search, to download the publicly available use files of all these different collections that we've demonstrated and described today. Most of them. There's a couple of them on that have different levels of protection, but by and large, they're all available like this. For those with more restricted level personally identifiable information, there are restricted use files that you can apply through the standard application process to have access to. It's a much more rigorous process that requires a number of steps, as you would if you're familiar with any university's type of IRB process and the various hoops you need to jump through and capabilities you need to demonstrate in order to, and protections you need to assign in order to get access to that data. But there's a clear path to it, and that's a big part of our work as well, as reviewing those, supporting researchers as they're accessing this data and using it for even better and different things than we might have conceived of in the first place. So please, if you have questions or you need support in accessing any data or any of these reports that you've seen, or collections that we talked about today, reach out to us. Go to Ask BJS. That goes straight to a team member, and then they will pass you to the relevant person or people to get support from. So we are here in your service. Please reach out if we can be helpful. I think that wraps us up. We got through all the data tools we wanted to describe.
One plug for JDD.
Okay,
Yeah,
go for it.
So this will be a new one. We don't have a data dashboard currently for jail-related data. And so this is one that Zhen Zhang on my staff is developing currently, and we hope it'll come out in 2026. And this will be an interactive tool as well. And kind of, we are getting things out, some of this data that's readily available for all stakeholders, folks who don't necessarily want to go download the data, analyze the data, or want some interaction with the data. This is going to be another opportunity on the jail side. We're probably going to start with more the state level stuff, then eventually we'll have the jail jurisdiction level, so 3,000 jails, and be able to point and click and explore without coding. And so that's going to be that's a big enhancement for BJS and especially for the jail information out there. There are some data tools out there that other folks have utilized, but it's not as broad. Might be more select jails, and we're trying to bring it to the national, state, and so we can analyze these data at all those levels.
That's great. So again, the pathway to access these archives of data at the National Archive, that's the link to get to it, but you can just Google it and it'll take you there. This is the standard application process pathway, so that it's a standardized, formalized process to access sensitive information. And like I described, IRB approval and the various criteria that are important.
And most of our data is public use access, so you don't have to utilize this. But when you get to SPY and some of these inmate-related surveys, that's when...
Or NCRP.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to go through that. And then the BJS library, this is the place where you can search by topic or data keywords and get everything. We post it all. In fact, looking at those jurisdiction notes you just shared, that gave me ideas. I mean, for the qualitative research for a student that's interested in
absolutely
all the different criteria and difficulties in
Yeah, often we get inquiries from students that are on a time crunch. And so I think these dashboards definitely come in handy than having them go download the data, especially when it comes to some of the restricted data. Obviously in our reports and our dashboards, we're not doing individual level data, but for them to have access to SPY, for example, they'd have to go through the statement application, and probably by the time their semester will be over, potentially,
could happen.
To get access. So having that data dashboard, especially with like SPY, which is new to BJS over the last few years, is definitely an enhancement, and serves well to all the stakeholders and folks that are interested in our data.
Yeah. And so I hope our message today mirrors what you heard from Kevin yesterday, where we are actively listening and actively working to provide back to the public the information that's been entrusted to us by our statute and by the work that we do. So here's our contact information. Again, Rich Kluko, Todd Minton. We are happy to connect, and I think there may be a couple of questions, so I'm going to stop sharing and open it up.
Wonderful, thank you so much. We did have a few questions in the chat. One of the first questions was, do any of these surveys for inmates collect information on parental status, particularly as part of regular intake?
Not at regular intake. That's an interesting way of looking at it. Maybe there could be the capacity to, I mean, we don't ask for that on our National Prisoner Statistics Program when we go to facilities and we go to jurisdictions and ask for the national level data. We do get to parental status at the individual level surveys that we've spoken a little bit about, the survey of inmates in local jails, the survey of prison inmates, that last visualization that we spun up with the number of parents was based on those self-report questions. So that's what it's based on. That's the information that we currently have and make available.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question in the chat was, which of these publications or dashboards deals directly with death and custodies for prison and jail facilities?
So the deaths in custody reporting was transferred from BJS to BJA, and so they're the agency that is responsible for collecting and reporting on that information, and they are doing that now on an annual basis. So in the past, they were connected, and we used our various collections to help inform the deaths in custody reporting. We do have the federal deaths in custody reporting program that comes through BJS. We didn't highlight that today, but that is a collection that is required and mandated, and my associates in another unit collect and publish on that as well. So if you go to BJS, you'll see a big write-up there about what pieces have shifted, what pieces remain, and then you can access the information that we still provide, and then access the archive of what we did up until 2019, and then you can go to our sister agency BJA to see the visualization and the reporting that they're doing on deaths in custody.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I'll allow some time and space for other folks to ask questions if they have them, and I'll wait to see. And if there's no more questions, I think we have a couple more in the chat to get to. Okay, let's round out with just a couple more questions on the chat. Just a couple more left. What's your approach for states that don't have parole but have other forms of community supervision?
So maybe a little bit more description. So not community supervision. So if it's not parole or probation, we're not collecting that information. So are you thinking stuff like diversion or elements like that? Maybe Madison wants to jump in and give some more context.
From our jail collections, we capture a little bit about there's a small population of folks that are that the jails are supervising in the community. So they're not physically incarcerated in the jail. And it could be on electronic monitoring, could be on those diversion programs. But outside of that,
yeah, I mean, the Census of Correctional Facilities gets at the release facilities, halfway houses and such in the community that people are partially confined in, and so sometimes in our communications with them, we have to distinguish what percentage of their population are in the various levels of supervision in order for them to be in or out of scope for the CCF. But yeah, Madison, I hope that helps to answer. If you had specific examples of community supervision types that you're interested in, maybe I could give it a little bit better. But yeah, that's
maybe some court-related stuff that we could explore.
Yeah. So we do have a courts unit, but that do collect information. But again, at the courts, then it's a whole different ball of wax collecting data from all the courts. So do you want to go on, Sarah?
Sure. I think we got one more question here, and then we can probably wrap up for time. But the last question is, do the individual level collections allow for tracking individuals across states? If, for instance, if they recidivate in another area? Also, do any of the recent collections include data on restricted housing or solitary confinement?
Yeah, great questions on both cases. So yeah, Brianna, that's one of the real advantages of being able to use the National Corrections Reporting Program. I remember when I was in Colorado, we would be able to tell who came back and recidivated in Colorado, but not in Montana. Let's say if we released them and they went there and we're no longer on supervision. But with NCRP, what we're able to do is we collect them from all the different jurisdictions. And so we're able to analyze and to track those that recidivated in the state where they were incarcerated, as well as those that recidivated and entered into another jurisdiction in another state. That's one of the reasons sometimes where you'll see BJS's recidivism rates can be slightly higher than what is self-reported by states, and that's one of the key reasons I think for that delta between the two. As far as the question about restrictive housing, solitary confinement, yes, we did include that as one of our questions on the 2024 Census of Correctional Facilities, the number of people who were in administrative segregation, and then we gave a definition, the commonly accepted definition of 22 hours or more confined per day. So that information it's also available in a couple of other places, but that's the most widespread up-to-date information that we have collected on, and that report is coming out in early 2026. And maybe I'll jump in real quick from that. Yeah, we love the idea of API, bulk download, etc. And so you speak in the language of our technical director, who has great dreams about making more of this available by API and bulk download. So we hear you on that and are working on plans to make it more reliable and faster update and more modern, so that you can just port it directly to your applications or your environments that you wanted to use it. Sorry, Sarah.
No, it's all good. Just wanted to thank you both very much for being here. That was a wonderful presentation. And I think with that, we can conclude this session. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate you.
All right, we're now going to go to another information session about something that JIRN offers.
JIRN members have access to SAGE Research Methods. SAGE Research Methods is your one-stop resource for building confidence in every stage of the research process. Whether you're a student learning the basics, a faculty member teaching methods, or a researcher tackling a new project, SAGE Research Methods provides the guidance and tools you need. The site is designed to help users find the content they need, whether they want to learn a little or a lot about their chosen method. Built on SAGE's legacy of methods publishing, SAGE Research Methods is an essential online resource. It boasts a comprehensive content library with over 1,000 books, reference works, journal articles, and instructional videos covering a wide range of research methods. It includes books and handbooks, Little Green and Blue books, which are specialized guides for quantitative and qualitative methods, and reference tools like the Methods Map. This interactive map visually illustrates how different research method concepts are interconnected, which is helpful for exploring and learning relationships between methodologies. SAGE Research Methods features quantitative and qualitative data sets, accompanied by step-by-step guides to help users master data analysis methods. This bank of topical, engaging practice data sets, indexed by method and data type, enables users to practice analysis using real data from SAGE Research. SAGE Research Methods also includes several other useful tools, like the Which Stats test. This tool helps users identify the appropriate statistical tests for their data and research questions. The Project Planner tool guides users through designing and organizing their research. The Included Reading List feature enables users to bookmark and share useful resources. It also includes blog posts, newsletters, podcasts, and videos that dig into themes like mentoring, evaluation, and method innovation. As a JIRN member, you also have access to the Data Visualization module. This module is designed to help users create impactful and informative visualizations that enhance reports and presentations. It emphasizes visual storytelling, guiding learners through the essentials of selecting and crafting clear, effective visual representations of data. Members can access SAGE Research Methods by clicking on the Member Login button located at the top of our homepage. Once you have logged in, you will see the SAGE Resources button in the Quick Links menu. To learn more about SAGE Research Methods and all the benefits of JIRN membership, visit our website.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rose Worth. I'm going to be moderating the next panel. I am a program analyst from the North Carolina Criminal Justice Analysis Center. I'm standing in today for Michelle Beck, who is the director of the Criminal Justice Analysis Center, which is the local SAC here in North Carolina. We are about to move into a session with two presentations. It's going to be focused on integrating complex data for policy impact, touching on a conversation that came up yesterday about how to integrate the different types of data that exist in different silos across all of our state agencies. So the first presentation is going to be from the Wisconsin Bureau of Justice Information and Analysis. They're going to be sharing their experience of building a statewide research data warehouse that links individuals by addresses, events across criminal history, court, and corrections data. And they're also going to be sharing insights from a current firearms-focused project. So let's get into that presentation now. If you are ready, I will introduce Christopher Henning, who is an analyst from the Wisconsin SAC at the Wisconsin Department of Justice, where he's been a principal investigator on several criminal justice research and data collection projects. Chris is also a fellow member of the JIRN board, along with Michelle and several of our other moderators today. So, Chris, if you are ready, I will hand the floor over to you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit today about a research or a data warehouse that the Wisconsin Department of Justice has built. I know this has come up like over the last 3 days. It sounds like lots of states, lots of agencies are building them. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how we built ours, a little bit about the methodology, a little bit about some of the challenges that we've come across, and then maybe a little bit at the end about lessons learned. I do have to say I did cut this short, so we might not get to the case study focus, but if we have time, I might be able to add that back in and talk about it. Okay, so one big distinction that I wanted to point out, so what we're calling the Consolidated Research Data Warehouse was built specifically and exclusively for research and statistical projects. So in our operating rules for operating this warehouse, we've basically explicitly said it cannot be used for any administrative purpose. So law enforcement's not allowed to access it. Prosecutors aren't allowed to access it. Nobody's really allowed to access it to make individualized decisions on people that might be within it. And the reason for that is because we've taken some liberties with how we've connected things. And it could be very detrimental for a person to have a decision made on data that has been connected potentially incorrectly. But because this is mainly for research and statistical projects, when you're not looking at individuals, those potential erroneous connections kind of like fall out into the margin of error. So it's less of a problem. Okay, so at the moment, our data warehouse consists of 3 key chunks or 3 key sources of information. Right now, it's arrests from the Wisconsin Criminal History Repository. We have criminal charges and their dispositions from the Wisconsin courts. We're lucky in our state, we have a consolidated court system. So all of our courts use the same case management system. We have access to it, and this research data warehouse is pulling data directly from it. And then also in it at the moment is prison admissions. So individuals or individual events, I should say, of when they are entering prison or the Wisconsin Department of Corrections custody. So those are the key 3 sources of data that are currently in it, but we have plans and are already in the works for expanding it quite significantly. So upcoming, very shortly, we're going to be integrating NIBRS data. So from the Wisconsin Incident-Based Reporting System, we're taking reported offenses and their related arrests. We have a statewide use of force and arrest-related death reporting program. All of that data is also going to get consumed into this warehouse. And then we're also working with our Department of Corrections to incorporate not only the admissions that they've already given us, but also discharges. And then they also manage all of our community corrections for the state. So getting the discharges from them, but then also the admissions and discharges to the community corrections portion of those offenders. Okay, so those are the sources. And then maybe uniquely, maybe not, we've connected all of that stuff on three primary levels. We've connected on an entity/agency level. So you can kind of look at across agencies and see, or compare, I guess, compare across agencies. We've connected things on an event level. So you'll be able to see, like, if the starting point is, let's say, an arrest event, you can follow that arrest all the way through criminal charges, its disposition, and then if it resulted in a prison admission, be able to track that all the way through. And then also on a person level. So you can look at individual people. I'll talk a little bit about this, I think, later, but they've been de-identified. So all of the unique people have unique IDs in this warehouse. And that unique ID can be traced across all of these events. So if you're looking for, let's say, a population of people that had X or Y, you would be able to do that pretty easily. So today I want to talk about two of those connections and a third that is related but isn't related. So I'm going to talk about how events are connected and our methodology behind that, how people are connected and our methodology behind that. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we started connecting addresses as well. Okay, this is a very complicated chart. I have several of these. And then my next slide is kind of like actually talking the text behind it. So I'm going to keep flipping between the two. But essentially, how we are attempting, at least with these three primary sources of data, so the arrest events, the court data, and then prison admissions, the events are being connected through an arrest tracking number. And that is being produced by the Wisconsin Department of Justice as part of our criminal history repository. So when fingerprints get submitted as part of an arrest event, we then return a state ID for the person identifying those fingerprints, as well as an arrest tracking number. That arrest tracking number then gets bound to that arrest, and it follows that arrest through basically the Wisconsin criminal justice system. So when law enforcement submits a referral to our prosecutors to issue charges or have charges issued, part of that referral is this arrest tracking number. When the district attorney, if they decide to issue charges, that arrest tracking number then gets sent to the consolidated court system. So the court system then has that arrest tracking number, and then it follows through that. And then when, let's say, there is a conviction and a custodial sentence is ordered, that arrest tracking number then also makes it all the way back to the Department of Corrections. So we're able to basically from arrests follow individual charges. So it's a combination of arrest tracking number and then an arrest charge. So if you're looking at this chart, so like, let's say here's arrest charge 1, gets forwarded to the district attorney, they issue charges. So criminal charge 1 goes to the court filing, and then you can kind of see, here's the first disposition for it, here's the second, and then individual sentences, and then a prison admission. Same thing with the second charge and the third charge. The other thing I wanted to point out with this diagram is there's lots of many-to-one relationships. So a single arrest charge could end up having, I guess, technically multiple criminal charges, but that's less likely. But very likely is having multiple dispositions. So the first part might be charges filed. So that might be a disposition of the criminal charge. And then a second disposition at a later point in time might be a guilty verdict at criminal trial. That second disposition then could end up with multiple sentences. So that guilty verdict could result in the court ordering, let's say, community supervision and a fine. Or it could be a custodial sentence plus some sort of extended supervision after that custodial sentence. And then following that, if there was a custodial sentence entered by the courts, you would see that then on that individual prison admission charge. So we're linking essentially all of our events so far with those three sources, utilizing an arrest tracking number and different components, I guess, charge number, and then in the many to one conditions, if it's disposition 1, disposition 2, disposition 3, and then sentence 1, sentence 2, sentence 3, how they all connect, and then follow through to the next phases. Okay, there are some challenges, however, with that methodology. So one thing that we learned very early on was that not all arrests that occur in the state are actually submitted to the criminal history repository. So we have, I don't know, maybe not unique statutory language, but we have statutory language that requires all felonies to be submitted to the CCH, but only a subset of misdemeanors. We accept everything that gets submitted, but not all law enforcement agencies submit every single misdemeanor arrest to the repository. So when there isn't an arrest submitted, like a formal booking or a formal fingerprint taken, an ATN isn't generated then. So when we try to connect court data to an arrest where there isn't an ATN, it's not possible because there was no ATN generated. And the second challenge that we've come across is in some circumstances, those ATNs get hand keyed. And because they're a algorithmic number that's created, that makes no sense to the logical eye, there's sometimes typos. So there's erroneous digits, or they're transposed, or extra characters. So in some circumstances, we end up with ATNs that then don't correspond to anything. So that's the methodology of how we have connected those three primary sources. But as I mentioned earlier, we are planning on bringing in NIBRS data, use of force and arrest-related death data, and community corrections data. But there are those inherent challenges that I just mentioned a second ago, also with those other data sets. So because of NIBRS, and where it's positioned within the course of how people or data moves through the system, it's pre-arrest in most cases. So there isn't going to be an arrest tracking number. So we have a similar issue where our NIBRS data can't necessarily be connected easily using that arrest tracking number. Similarly, use of force and arrest-related deaths. Sometimes uses of force don't always result in an arrest or don't result in reportable arrest. And the arrest-related death component of that, depending on the circumstances, also might not have an arrest tracking number. Other issues we've kind of identified related to those two data sources also relate to criminal history, in that not all of the mandatory fields in our criminal history repository actually have data. So we're expecting, fields to get, or data to get entered in specific fields where it isn't. So that ends up becoming another challenge. So for example, one of our potential methodologies, instead of using arrest tracking number to connect events, is to use entity IDs or ORIs, originating entity identifiers, and case numbers to connect NIBRS or WIBRS data to criminal history events. In our criminal history repository, there should be a case number associated with every single arrest event. However, we've discovered that law enforcement on those arrest charges are not always entering that case number information. Similarly, the ORI mapping, we would have thought would have been, pretty simple, like a one-to-one, like every agency should theoretically have a pretty consistent ORI number. But we've also discovered that certain systems are using subsets of ORIs that other systems aren't. So to combat that, which we've already done, we basically had to make a mapping document. So every single permutation of a possible ORI for an agency or an entity got mapped to a single entity ID. So we're now able to link all those ORIs together to single entities. So one methodology for upcoming events would be to link ORI and case numbers, but there's some challenges with that. And another might be to use a combination of person information, and I'll get to this about how we're linking people in a moment, and offense information. So it might be a combination of, let's say, names, dates of birth, and then offense dates, arrest dates, or offense types to kind of see this person is in this system for committing some sort of offense on this date, and they're also in this other system for also committing an offense on this date. Those things likely go together. And then community corrections is a little bit easier because those people have already been identified through biometrics and fingerprints when they enter DOC custody. We're able to connect them on a person level a lot easier than some of the other people. Okay, linking people. We have two methods. Our primary method is utilizing the state ID, and this is also generated, I mentioned this before. So when a set of fingerprints gets submitted to the Wisconsin Department of Justice as part of the criminal history repository, it returns the state ID and that arrest tracking number. So if a state ID already exists for a set of fingerprints, it returns that existing state ID. If one doesn't exist, it creates one. So similarly, across the systems of moving that arrest tracking number or ATN, that state ID also follows through all those different stages. So we're able to basically link people from those disparate data sets utilizing that state ID where it exists. What we've done to kind of anonymize the data in the warehouse is every unique state ID ends up with a system-generated person ID. So that person ID is actually what is linking the people throughout the warehouse. So that's the primary method, but only happens in circumstances similar to what I said about the ATNs. That arrest submission or booking needs to be submitted to DOJ in order for us to return a state ID and an ATN. So there are court cases that exist where that arrest didn't happen, or that arrest booking wasn't submitted to DOJ. So in those circumstances, there is no ATN and there is no state ID attached to that court data. So what we've attempted to do as a secondary method is create tokens from our 3 different data sets based on demographic characteristics, names, and dates of birth. Might be better to show this on this. So for each different data source and each person, we've generated multiple tokens, and they're different combinations. So for example, one token might be last name, first name, date of birth, and sex, whereas another token might be last name, first initial, date of birth, and sex. We basically clean all of those variables, standardize them, smash them together, and then hash them. And then store all of those hashed values as these individual tokens. And then maybe this diagram is actually easier to see. And then there's a master table of tokens or reference table of tokens for the people that already exist in the warehouse, where we then cross-compare what's been created for each of those different data sets. And the ones that match, depending on which match level, we replace that token or that ID then with the person ID in the warehouse, consider them linked. And then the ones that aren't, essentially, we're creating a new person ID, and then they then will have matches in the warehouse, and then we consume that data. However, there are a few challenges with that token creation methodology. One being because of the people that are in the warehouse, or the people that are moving through the criminal justice system, there are lots of people that have similar sounding names, and in some circumstances, the same names and same demographic characteristics used by discrete individuals. So different sets of fingerprints, so we know that they're different people, having the same last name, first name, date of birth, and sex listed for them. So in those circumstances, we could have two different people, we know they're different because of the fingerprints, having the same sets of tokens. So I wish I had some statistics on that. We're still working through exactly what we're going to do in that matching methodology, like what we're going to drop, what we're going to keep, what we're going to decide to make separate people, even though they might not be. But that's a challenge that we've come across. It's probably not unique to us. But this and that matching and this token pattern and the potential for mismatching people was what I was alluding to before when I was saying our operating rules prohibit us from sharing or letting people use our resulting data sets for any kind of administrative purpose. Like, because of these tokens and how we're going to end up matching people, we could end up with connecting people that really are not the same person, or leaving them as two separate people when actually they are one. So you could probably imagine if somebody was using this combined data set to make some sort of, let's say, custody arrangement, that could lead. Is there a question? Sorry. Okay, we keep going. Okay, jumping on to addresses. This is a little different. So how we manage this task in our warehouse is we first identified or found a source that provided us with every single postal address in the state. And that got saved as a reference table in the warehouse, and it is split. So the street line of the address, like you see here, is broken into pieces. So house number, street direction, street name, street type, which is different than how our source data looks, where street address is one single column or variable, and then you have city, state, and zip. So step one of linking addresses is to split this street address line into the separate components of that street line. So house number, street direction, street name, street type. Then we're able to basically do a direct match between several variables. We're using house number, street direction, street type, and the zip code, or in some circumstances, the city as our primary linking methodology. So direct matches on house number, the direction of the street name, and then the zip code. And the reason for that is we've discovered that street type is not always accurate. It gets entered incorrectly. Sometimes what is meant to be like an avenue gets written as a street or a boulevard. And then the zip code is fairly accurate, but in some circumstances, the city has multiple. So in the secondary matching methodology, sorry, I should say part two of the main linking methodology will loop back through and use the city instead of the zip code to cover the ones that don't directly match. And then what's left, so all the ones that we can't match, the main address or central address list has already been geocoded with latitude and longitude because geocoding has a cost. There's a time component and actually a cost component. we decided to not directly geocode every single address. We were only geocoding the ones that we couldn't match in this primary methodology. So that allowed us to cut down the number of addresses we needed to identify latitude and longitude for. But by doing that then with the ones that we couldn't match in the first methodology, we are very successful then in matching latitude and longitude with the central address list. So again, this slide is just verbalizing what I just tried to explain from that diagram. There are some challenges with this too. I talked about one already, the wrong street type, and then there's also wrong spellings and wrong zip codes, which we tried to address with one, using the city name instead of the zip code. And then I already said that there was a cost, time and money to geocoding all the addresses. So that was our secondary match. And then the third challenge is this process doesn't really address any sort of out-of-state address because we did not consume that into like our central table. Okay, now flipping to key lessons learned. I would say understanding the source data is very important. So this was a joint project for us between the SAC and like our IT staff. Our IT staff don't know the data, and I will say the bits that we did have them do, there was very error prone because of not knowing the data very well. So they were making judgment calls that they probably shouldn't have made. So knowing what the source data looks like and how you might link it and what the ins and outs are, I would say are important and something that we learned. It's also going to be an iterative process. So you're going to try something, it might fail or it might not succeed 100%. So then you're going to have to learn from that, modify what you did and try it again. And we do this, or have been doing this, nonstop. So this iterative process keeps going. We keep learning. So all three of those linking methodologies that I touched on, that was our process. We tried something, we weren't successful 100% at it. We learned from that, we modified it, tried something else, and then we kept going. We originally budgeted like 3 years to do this project. It took us 5.5, and it's still not technically complete with those 3 original data sources. So I would say another lesson is probably to double or maybe even triple the amount of time you think this is going to take. While it seems simple, it's really not. Have some clearly defined roles and responsibilities. We had lots of headbutting with our IT about who was responsible for which piece. So it would have saved us a lot of headache to maybe have had that done in advance before we started. You know, this is your component, you're responsible for it. This is our component, we're responsible for it. We come together and then we share, and then, you know, we have to take joint responsibility for something. And then also I would say know your institution's skills. Like, is what you're wanting to do, can your IT actually accomplish it? They told us that they could do lots of things, and it turned out that they couldn't. So in lots of circumstances, we were having to like go back or have to wait longer while they like, you know, brushed up. Or what ended up being sort of successful was we ended up hiring lots of contractors, so external help, and had to bring them in. But if we would have known that up front, that process probably would have been smoother and could have went quicker. But tied with that, also then our costs. Like, we didn't anticipate that we would need to hire contractors, so that wasn't really in our budget. And then also we decided to build a cloud infrastructure. So we had budgeted for the building of this and the hosting of it, but we didn't really think about like maintenance costs. Like, how long is it going to take to like sustain this? And then I would say making sure that everyone is on the same page about the use cases. So we also had lots of headbutts with our IT about the distinction or difference between an administrative data warehouse and a research data warehouse. And I hope I explained very clearly at the start of this that we were building a research data warehouse that IT didn't really understand. So like I said, that caused issues. So being clear on how you want to use it from the get-go might also save some headaches. And then documentation. We had so many people leave like in the middle of this project, and I'd have new people come in, but the person that left wouldn't always document. So it took a lot of time trying to figure out like, what was done and why, and how do we bring the new person up to speed to, be able to take on what that person left off. That's all I've got. So thank you guys.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to hold questions. There's one in the chat until after the second presentation, but I think anyone who's engaged in this type of process trying to align different criminal justice data sets knows how ambitious and complicated of a project it is. So we're going to hear about one more example, and then we'll get the two of you together to answer questions and have a little bit of discussion. So now I'm going to introduce our next presenter, Niloufer Tabor, who is the director of the Research and Policy at the DC Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which is the SAC for the District of Columbia. She's going to share their experience using similar project key identifiers and fuzzy matching to merge data across agencies and potentially get into a use case around a juvenile diversion dashboard. So if you are ready, I will hand the floor over to you, Niloufer.
My name is Niloufer Tabor. I work as the Director of Research and Policy for DC's Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. The CJCC in the District of Columbia also houses the jurisdiction SAC. So today I'm going to just give a brief discussion about fuzzy merging, why we use fuzzy merging techniques, what are fuzzy merging techniques, what does that mean? I'll get into the weeds a little bit about specifics regarding algorithms that can be used to conduct fuzzy merging. I'm also going to share our standard operating procedure at the DC SAC for using it, and then some of the work product. I actually have a diversions dashboard for adults rather than the juvenile dashboard that we had discussed before. So why do we use fuzzy merging in DC? DC is fairly unique in the country in the structure of our criminal and juvenile justice systems, in that much of our criminal justice system is actually operated by the federal government. So, for example, we don't have a district attorney in DC. Both federal offenses and DC code offenses are prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office. Our superior court for DC code offenses is actually a federal court. There's a line in congressional appropriations for that court. And also part of our juvenile justice system that oversees juvenile predispositions is operated out of that federal court. And then the other part is operated by a district agency that reports up to the mayor. So that's to say that with so many different systems, judicial and executive, federal and local, we actually don't have a single state identifier, as Chris was referring to in Wisconsin, that they use. We have multiple different identifiers from police, from the court, from different juvenile justice agencies, from the Bureau of Prisons, for example. And there are some agencies that will record another agency's identifier, which can help us in sort of a bilateral way merge data, but we don't always have that common identifier when we're trying to match across two systems or even multiple systems. So we have to triangulate across other pieces of personally identifiable information when matching data across agency systems. So other jurisdictions may face similar issues with SIDS not being used across all agencies or carried across data sources, or perhaps you are working on a project where you're trying to merge criminal justice records against health records or education records where you don't have a state identifier. So if you face a similar situation, hopefully this will be helpful for you. So what is fuzzy merging? So generally, we would want to merge data across systems using that unique identifier that is present across all of the different data systems, such as a state ID or a national identifier like a social security number. But if we don't have that, what can we do? We could, for example, concatenate together other pieces of information that we have and then merge on that concatenation. So taking an example here of someone named John Smith, who was male with a date of birth of January 1st, 1980, we could create our own unique identifier by concatenating together and coming up with SMITH JOHN 01011980M. However, there may be differences in how that data is recorded across different data systems, or completeness in how many of those 6 different pieces of information are recorded across different data systems. Since we are using here 6 different variables, first and last name, the 3 elements of the date of birth, and sex, there could be typos in how that data is recorded. So for example, Smith could be mistyped as SMIHT, John and John, with and without an H. You could have names that have punctuation in them, such as the last name O'Neill has an apostrophe. It may be that the records management system of one agency doesn't allow for such punctuation. We also have seen at times when months are entered in numerically into a records management system, sometimes someone's finger slips and January is entered instead of as 1, is entered as 1-1. So a person will have in one database their month of birth recorded as November. So fuzzy merging methods allow for some variability in how these different pieces of personally identifiable information are captured across data sets. So fuzzy merging methods use an algorithm to quantify how similar 2 records are to each other. And that quantification is called a similarity score. Similarity score is a continuous variable that takes values between 0 and 1 that represents a quantitative assessment of how similar 2 records are to each other. You can use a computer program to calculate these similarity scores, and then you apply a cutoff, dividing along that continuous measure into non-matches and matches, or use a best practice approach where you do some individual assessment. So I'm going to try and make this a little more concrete by talking about what are these different algorithms, how are they used to calculate similarity scores, and then how do we apply those similarity scores when making judgments about what matches are real matches. So for algorithms, so Chris referred to one, for example, Soundex. There are many different options. I just want to say I'm only presenting 3 here. There are many more than 3. So Soundex is an algorithm that translates different sounds into an alphanumeric string, starting with the letter that the word starts with, and then numbers following it that represent sounds that are similar to each other, like P and B can sound similar when spoken. So an example is, my name is Niloufer, and it is spelled Niloufer, but there are alternate spellings that are perfectly legitimate. Nilufar, Nilopher even. These are all legitimate alternate spellings. Soundex will translate each one of these into an alphanumeric code that is N416. OSA, optimal string alignment. What that does is it calculates the number of steps or operations that it takes to transform one string into a different string. So these operations or these steps can include inserting a character, deleting a character, substituting a character, transposing 2 characters. In OSA, part of that algorithm is that you're not allowed to change the same character or substring more than once. Levenstein, similarly, is also based on the number of operations to go from one word to another. Differs from OSA mostly in that it doesn't allow for transpositions. So if I have AB, I can't just in one step turn that into BA. So here's an example using that 3rd algorithm that I mentioned called Levenstein. What we want to do is calculate that minimum number of operations that it takes to go from one string to another string. So to make this a little more concrete, let's go from example to samples. So starting with example, we can add an S onto the end to have examples. We remove the E at the beginning, step 2, to have examples. And then we replace that X with the S to get samples. So it took us 3 steps, 3 operations to get from example to samples. That number of steps, minimum number of steps, is called the edit distance. And then we also have to understand what is the maximum possible distance that we could travel. That's just the length of the longer string. In this case, both of them, example and samples, have 7 characters. So the maximum possible distance is 7. The formula for the similarity score is 1 minus the ratio of the edit distance to the maximum possible distance, which in this case is 1 minus 3/7, which is 0.57. So that similarity score for example and samples is 0.57. And I just want to make sure that everyone is clear that I'm only sharing this hand calculation to try and concretize these steps of how these different algorithms function, how they fit into a similarity score. Your software will do it for you. Excel has a mechanism to do it, R, Stata, SAS, all of it. All of them will calculate similarity scores for you. So then the question becomes, which algorithm should I pick? And does it matter which algorithm I pick? And the answer is yes, it very much matters which algorithm you pick, because you get different distances and different similarity scores depending on the algorithm. So just looking at the first example that I have up here of Smith versus Smit, S-M-I-H-T, looking at Levenstein versus OSA. In OSA, there's only 1 step difference because transpositions are allowed. In Levenstein, they're not allowed, so it takes 2 steps. And therefore, I get a different similarity score depending on which algorithm I use. So how do I know which one to pick? 2 options. So one is, if you have an understanding of how data is entered into the different data systems you interact with and want to match up, you can use that to guide which algorithm you want to pick. Or do it empirically. Test out several different algorithms, see which one behaves the best with your different data sets, which one gives you the most accurate results. So then how do we actually employ these algorithms and similarity scores in matching up data between data systems? So the first step is deciding what variables to use. So we use first name and last name, all lowercase with punctuation removed. We take the date of birth, it's numeric, but we parse it into the 3 different elements of day, month, and year. And we use sex, coded as M and F. We apply the chosen fuzzy merging algorithm. We usually use OSA. And then once we have a match, we randomly select a subset of the data and then manually evaluate those matches. We actually look at the data and say, yes, this one is a match. No, this one is not a match. Then what we do is compare the range of similarity scores among those that we said were a match and those we said were not a match. And we look to see if there's good separation there. If there is not good separation, if there's a lot of overlap in similarity scores, we'll iterate among steps 1 to 4 if we need to. And then finally, what we'll do is select a cutoff point. And sometimes we do have to balance false negatives and false positives against each other. And I'll talk a little more about these last 2 steps here. So when we do that manual check, what does that look like? So this is, of course, data that I've made up rather than, publicly share PII. This is matching up 2 data sets. We have table 1 and table 2. What last name looks like in the first data set, table 1, what it looks like in table 2, the second data set. Differences in the first name, gender, or date of birth. The similarity score is in this second to last column on the end. This is produced by the software. The manual review is our own review of this row. So someone manually goes through and says, looking at Smith, Smit, John and John without an H, gender, and date of birth, I agree that this is a match. They've done the same thing for the second row and said, no, this one is not a match. Whoever does this, I recommend you don't have the SIM score viewable to that analyst because it can influence whether or not they will manually say that it's a match or not. So then we graph the similarity scores into two histograms, looking at the range of scores among those that are a match and the range of scores that are not a match. And in this example, this is an actual example, it worked out really well. So the SIM scores for all of those that we said were a match in our random subsample are all above 0.8. The SIM scores in all of the ones that we said were not a match were all below 0.8. So we feel comfortable then assigning a cutoff point of 0.8 for our SIM score in this example. And then we run it again and say only keep matches where the SIM score is above 0.8. So here's an example where it didn't work out so perfectly. You don't always get that really clear separation. So sometimes we'll get matches where where you have two matches with the same SIM score, but according to your manual review, one of those is a match and one is not a match. So here we see an example of that, where all of the SIM scores for those that are a match are above about 0.82 here. But there are a few non-matches that also have a SIM score above 0.82. So these are false positives. And then similarly, all of the non-matches have SIM scores that are below 0.9. But then here we have some that are matches that also have SIM scores below 0.9. So these are false negatives. So what should we choose? What cutoff point should we choose? Again, it sort of depends. What is your context? What is your goal? You have to decide whether false positives or false negatives are more damaging to your analysis. So is a false positive or a false negative anti-conservative? And you want to pick against that. Pick the more conservative approach. So for us at CJCC, a common thing we're looking for is how many people in a program or on some sort of supervision have been rearrested during the program period or while on that supervision. To be conservative in that calculation, we err more on the side of excluding false positives if that's needed. We don't want to overestimate the number of people who are rearrested. So here we have an example of some of the work product that we get from this approach. So this is a dashboard that we have. This is a static image, but we have a live image of this if you want to go to the address down below of deferred prosecution agreements and deferred sentence agreements. So this is the first page of a multi-page dashboard, which has some information about the prosecution authority that is entered into the agreement with the defendant, the charges that are associated with the DPA and DSA, the outcome, and then some demographics about the defendants. And on this next page, we have represented the results of that matching procedure, looking for arrests during the period of supervision. So we've divided people into matches, people who were arrested during the period, and non-matches, people who were arrest-free. And among those matches, then we do further analyses on the number of arrests for new offenses while on the deferral agreement, the charges associated with those arrests, and then release violations that were addressed by the Metropolitan Police Department in DC. So that is all I have for you today. Happy to take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop those in the chat right now. I see, so Chris popped a question into the chat. So Chris, if you want to come back on camera and unmute, if you want to ask your question directly to Nilu, and Nilu, if you have any questions for Chris, since the two of you presented these similar but different projects, we can start there. I'll ask a question or two, and then I'll go to the questions in the chat.
Yeah, I was just curious if you explored using double metaphone or metaphone 3 at all instead of fuzzy matching. or as another type of fuzzy matching?
No, we haven't used that. We haven't explored that, but I'd love to chat with you about it afterward.
And Chris,
Okay.
do you want to provide a bit of an explanation of what that is for folks who might not be familiar?
Yeah, it's just another, so it's a phonetic matching methodology or algorithm that just uses a different, I don't know, I can't explain it well. It's a little bit more accurate, I would say, for phonetic matching than just a straight sound X or fuzzy match. And it does better with more European sounding names. So it can do better at matching like name types than a sound X might. So like Matthew and Matthias might end up being very similar.
So before I have a question, but Nilu, any questions that you had burning for Chris after his presentation?
I don't think so, not at the moment.
All right. So one question kind of jumping off of that is that there's a lot of different algorithms, there's a lot of different methods that you can use for these types of projects. This is very apropos for me to be moderating right now because we're in the beginning stages of a similar matching project in our center. So I'm curious for each of you, what are the best resources that you've found in engaging on these projects? And that could be trainings, papers, examples, people that you talked to, conferences that you went to. What were kind of most helpful for you getting up to speed and learning all of the different options approaching this type of project? And I guess, Neela, we can start with you and then I'll go back to Chris.
Yeah, so we actually have relied on a number of our different softwares and the expertise that we have within our team to collaboratively develop, to select different algorithms and collaboratively develop our matching procedure. So we actually did rely internally on our own team. So thankfully we have 5 people in our team able to represent 5 different viewpoints and experiences to support on that.
That is an incredible team that it sounds like you have there. Chris, what about you? Over the last 5 years, or however long you've been working on this project, what have you found to be the most useful?
I'll say we're pretty similar. We relied a lot on our team and a lot of trial and error. So before let's talk about the iterative process. I was speaking more high level than I guess DC was talking. I think we did a lot of the same things. So, looking at match scores and then, figure out where we're going to cut off and where we're not going to cut off. But there's a lot of trial and error that went into that, what's working and what's not, and why is it not working? And where are you missing data? And like, what do you do with that? Oh, do you drop a variable? Do you keep a variable? And then I would say, like, I think we've had, I don't know, as many conversations as I think we could. I shouldn't say that. We've had many conversations with other people that have been trying this and tried to learn from them. And I've learned that more people are trying this. So like, I'd love to have many more conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone who's listening right now is engaged in this type of project, has resources on the top of their mind, I'll throw a couple into the chat myself, but please put things into the chat so we can all connect with one another and be resources for one another. I wanted to ask you, Chris, a specific question that you got from someone in the chat, which was from Karima Mojedidi, wanted to know specifically about that ATN, the arrest tracking number. How often was that missing? And I guess sort of in general, you talked a lot about various missingness issues within your data set and how often sort of rough percentage wise were you running into those issues? And then Nilu, I think you didn't necessarily mention missing data, but I might pop over to you and see if that was something that came up for you as well.
I don't have exact statistics because we have another project that actually is trying to answer that, like through NCHIP. But I will say, like, preliminarily, we were finding it was a lot higher than we thought it was going to be, depending on the type of offense and how it would have gotten reported. So was it a felony? Was it a misdemeanor? Was it one of the catch-all misdemeanors that should have been reported? Some of those were a lot higher, like they should be 0, but some were up to like 20%. So quite a significant chunk.
So
I'll have
for
more to
us,
say on that in the future. Sorry.
Yeah, Nilu, do you want to jump in?
yeah, so we use 6 very basic pieces of information, first and last name, sex, and then the 3 elements of the date of birth. It's not really missing very often. It can be inaccurate, but we don't really face missingness. We do face missingness on the key identifier that we would usually want to use, the unique ID, like the police department identifying number or a court identifying number, et cetera.
So we do have one follow-up question that I think I'm going to let you both answer in the chat, but it looks like it was interesting to a couple people about the exact like link thresholds and link rates that you were able to achieve in the project. But since we only have a couple minutes before our break, I wanted to ask you both, since this is a policy impact data integration panel, if there are, Nilu, you presented one particular use case. Chris, you talked about a use case that you all have. So I was wondering if you could each say a little bit more about your sort of planned use cases for either the integrations that you presented on or similar project, or your kind of wish list use cases for this type of data integration. And I'll start with Nilu for this time and then switch back over to Chris.
So the DC SAC actually has legislative mandates to monitor a range of different steps within the criminal justice system, ranging from, reported crime, arrests, diversions, juvenile commitments, et cetera. So our use cases are really driven by our legislative mandates. Yes, I'll stop there.
So some good legislative backup for those use cases. What about you, Chris?
I would say all driver for the reason to create our data warehouse was recidivism analysis. We have another presentation later in the day from a Yearwood award that I'm hoping somebody's going to talk about utilizing the research data warehouse to like actually complete that evaluation. But essentially, it allows us to measure new arrests, new charges, new convictions, new prison admissions for different sets of people. And we weren't really able to do that before. Like it wasn't all linked in a neat way. So this allows us to kind of do it anonymized. So like we can do it without actually having to know who a participant is because it's all utilizing participant IDs, or sorry, I should say person IDs. And then another advantage is that missingness that I was talking about before. So we have a sample of arrests and we have a sample of court cases, but we don't know, how many arrests are missing that shouldn't be missing. That would have given us a bigger picture or a better picture of like what's happening in the arrest realm. So now having it linked and being able to identify what's missing in ATN and what should have had an ATN based on what was charged, you can get a better picture of completeness, which is useful as a footnote in research reports, but also useful in when you're talking to policymakers or even law enforcement who might be using the CCH for decision making to let them know it's not complete in certain areas and we need to work on to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I am hopeful that as algorithms and technology continues to advance, that this is projects that will only get better over time. Of course, the data sets are what the data sets are. So there's always going to be some challenges with it. I wanted to also just underline, particularly with DC's presentation, they talked about the sort of integration of the iteration and the manual review in addition to the reliance on the algorithms and the kind of wedding of that technical knowledge and sort of eyes on the data sets. And I think Chris also emphasized knowledge of the data sets being incredibly important for this. If you will permit me, I'm just going to also brag real quick about the state of North Carolina, because I just learned about this project, and I'm hopeful that other states will embark on similar projects. Our kind of state level IT entity in North Carolina is embarking on a matching process across not just the criminal justice system, but a number of different data silos across the state to try and create unique identifiers. So they're not merging data sets together and creating a warehouse, but they're creating a sort of repository of unique identifiers so that as people want to work on projects linking people, they will already have this sort of pre-established warehouse of unique identifiers resulting from this type of matching procedures. And I feel like that is approaching solving a problem of working across data silos that researchers have been talking about for decades. So that was exciting for me to hear about in my home state and to hear about the two projects that you all presented today. We had a few questions that we weren't able to get to, so apologies to those folks, but hopefully Nilu and Chris can answer some questions in the chat as well. We are going to move on to our next break. Join me in thanking in the chat our two wonderful presentations. And we're going to share another little bit of information for you about a JIRN member benefit, access to the SAGE collection of criminology research journals. And then, like usual, we're going to go into a break and we will come back together at 3:30 for our next session. So thank you all, and looking forward to the rest of the conference.
JIRN members have access to the SAGE Criminology and Criminal Justice Collection. It emphasizes connecting theory and research to real-life practice with journals, books, and digital products that represent the work of some of the most influential minds in the field. This collection gives you access to over 40 journals, including Crime and Delinquency, Journal of Interpersonal Violence, and Criminal Justice Policy Review. You can download special issues, collections, and a selection of most read articles. Browse their journal portfolio, explore their videos, podcasts, and more. With this resource, you are one step away from accessing the most recent and cited criminal justice research. Members can access SAGE Journal's Criminology and Criminal Justice Collection by clicking on the Member Login button located at the top of our homepage. Once you have logged in, you will see the SAGE Resources button in the Quick Links menu. To learn more about SAGE Journal's Criminology and Criminal Justice Collection and all the benefits of JIRN membership, visit our website.
Hey folks, I'm going to welcome everyone back. So if you could come back from your break, that's great. Hi, my name's George Shaler. Again, I'm the board president of the Justice Information Resource Network, and it's my distinct pleasure to moderate this session. We're going to hear from our 6 Douglas Yearwood National Publication Award winners. Before we get into that, I'd just like to give people a little background on this award. In 1986, JIRN, then known as the Justice Research and Statistics Association, or JRSA, established the National Publication Awards as the Philip Hoke Awards in memory of the first Louisiana SAC director and one of the founders of JRSA. In 2012, the award was renamed in memory of longtime North Carolina SAC director and former JRSA president Douglas Yearwood. Doug became the SAC director in 1998 and served JRSA in numerous ways. He was elected to every office on the executive committee, an impressive feat, including president, and served on several committees. Under his leadership, the North Carolina SAC served as a model for the role SACs can play in state government. Prior to becoming the SAC director, Doug worked as an information systems planner and a social research associate with the Governor's Crime Commission, and he held research positions with the State Attorney General's Office and the Federal Bureau of Prisons, and was an advanced certified law enforcement planner through the International Association of Law Enforcement Planners. So I just want to give people a little history there. Historically, JIRN has recognized exemplary work by state statistical analysis centers in two categories: statistical management reports that compile and disseminate key social indicators, and research policy analysis that analyze and evaluate justice policies. In the last year, we've added a new category, dashboards and data visualization projects. These awards set a high bar of expectation for the work our members in terms of policy relevance, core statistical and analytical methodology, skillful communication and dissemination of results, and adherence to code of ethics. We recognize the work of small SACs with 5 or fewer staff, as well as large SACs, and our judges are drawn from academic criminologists, researchers employed by think tanks, as well as those with experience in state statistical analysis centers. This year, we're very pleased to announce the following winners of the 2025 Douglas Yearwood National Publication Awards. All right, so with that background, we are going to first recognize the small SAC winner in the Statistical Management Publications Award category. The small SAC winner in this category is Idaho for sexual violence in Idaho, prevalence and health impacts. The judges noted that this publication has a beautiful layout. One remarked that its concise, structured format makes complex findings accessible to policymakers and the public. Thomas Strauss will share an introduction to this publication, and Thomas will present for 10 minutes. And I should say before Thomas, as Thomas gets ready, all of the Yearwood Award winners will be making longer presentations in the next couple of months during scheduled webinars. But Thomas will give us a little teaser as well as the other award winners. So Thomas, congrats, and I look forward to your remarks. We'll take questions at the end. Each award winner will have roughly 10 minutes, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So Thomas, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, George. And really cool to be the recipient of this year's Small SAC Award for Statistical Management Reports. This is one of my favorite things that we've done in quite a while. And so this is a real thrill for me to be able to talk to you about it in this context. And yeah, I'll give you a little bit about it now, but please come to the brown bag next week. We'll get into it a little bit more. I'll have more time to kind of dig into things. If this is interesting to you, which I hope it is, because I found it very, very interesting. All right, so just our standard funding acknowledgement here. This was paid for through an interagency contract with the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. And we specifically want to thank 2 units over there, the Sexual Violence Prevention Program and the Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. They brought this idea to us. They shared the data that they had collected that we ended up writing about in this report. They were very involved in reviewing the report and making sure that it was going to meet the needs of the purposes that they set out when they initially brought this idea to us. And so this project would not have happened without those 2 teams, and we're very thankful that they brought us in to work on this. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the communication, then I'll talk a little bit about why we did this project. We went with a research brief format because of the target audiences that the Sexual Violence Prevention Program wanted to reach. And so primarily it was meant to be subgrantees of the Rape Prevention and Education Grant, which, if you're not aware, that's a CDC grant. I believe it's part of VAWA. I could be wrong. Someone correct me if I'm getting that wrong and you know. But it was meant to be a resource mainly for program managers who are involved with sexual violence, both prevention and response programs, as well as the sexual violence prevention program manager at the state level. Those were kind of our key audiences for this. But we also wanted to make it accessible to other stakeholders, both in those agencies and outside of them, that might have an interest in data around sexual violence and its intersection with public health. And then finally, just about everything we do is posted online. And so we keep the public in mind when we're developing things, even if that's not necessarily our primary audience. We still want it to be understandable to anyone who might run across it. And then I'm always happy to give people my contact information as well if they want to talk to me about it, if they have questions or whatever. All my information is available on our website. I'm always open to that, but to kind of minimize the amount of that kind of interaction I have to do, we try to keep things as accessible as possible. So we first posted this report to our website in November of last year. We sent it as far and wide as we could. We used the Idaho State Police mailing list, which is my parent agency, for those that don't know. And we presented to the Idaho State Sexual Assault Response Team in December of 2024, which has a lot of key stakeholders at the state level around sexual violence prevention and response. And it got a good discussion going there about, what research we could continue to do now that we have kind of this baseline that we established in this report, which I'll talk about in a minute. So getting into some of the more specifics about why we did this project. So probably the same in your states as it is with ours. Data on sexual violence prevalence is very, very hard to come by. It's a very hard thing to manage, or to measure, I should say. The last time that Idaho did a state-level crime victimization survey was more than 10 years ago. And so there was a real interest in trying to get at some of that population level data that you don't necessarily get from administrative data like UCR or grant performance measures if we're looking at our victim service agencies. We do use that data quite a bit, but it only shows us part of the picture. The people that are kind of actively engaged with the criminal justice or the victim service kind of systems. And we know that we're likely missing a lot of people where, those cases never get reported or the victims never seek services. And so there is interest in trying to get at ways to measure that. What we discovered is that the Sexual Violence Prevention Program had added questions to our state's behavioral risk factor surveillance survey periodically over the years on people's experience with sexual violence. So if you're not aware of that survey, it's a large public health survey of adults all over the country. The CDC primarily funds and kind of runs that program, but states execute it at the state level. And so here over at our State Department of Health and Welfare is where that program is executed and all that data is collected. You can see from my slide here, the questions specifically around people's experience with sexual violence have been asked kind of off and on over the last 15 years or so. And so we have a little bit of data to work with there, not enough to really get trends, but we do have some population level data there that we have access to. And then in 2018 and 2020, the BRFIS also collected data on ACEs, which we use to get at child sexual abuse. And so in adding those questions to our state level survey, we were then able to start cross-tabulating those answers with demographics, respondent demographics, and we could look at associated health outcomes for people who either have or have not experienced sexual violence at some point in their life. The reason that Health and Welfare came to us to publish this report is because they have limited ability to publish research themselves. And so we've worked with a lot of programs over there over the years. We've used their data all over the place for all sorts of things. And so I have a lot of contacts in various programs over in that department. And when they were thinking about, geez, we've got all this data, we really want to get it out there. How are we going to do that? That we came to the top of their minds, and I was more than happy to help them out with that. Use our expertise to get it out in sort of a very accessible and user-friendly way. So very quickly, how did we do this project? We collected the prevalence estimates from our BRFIS team. So actually on my end, there was very little kind of real data analysis that we had to do since the BRFIS team had generated those estimates already. Basically, all we had to do was take that, kind of comb through it, pick out the interesting things, and then write it up. So they gave me a massive Excel spreadsheet with estimates of both raw numbers and percentages of respondents to different questions, along with their confidence intervals. We had things disaggregated by public health district. In Idaho, we have 7 health districts, so we can get below the state level and get a little bit more regional in our analysis. And they gave us data on 42 different health outcomes that they cross-tabulated between people who have experienced or have not experienced sexual violence. And they were also able to estimate the number and percentage of the state population that had experienced sexual violence both within their lifetime and within the past 12 months prior to taking the survey. Once we had all of that data from them, we popped it into Tableau Desktop for my quote unquote analysis that we did. And I found this to be a really easy way to kind of visually compare those confidence intervals to test for statistical significance. And it might be a little hard to see on the screen here, but this is an example of one way that we set that up, where on the left side of the screen, you've got the actual estimates. On the top is the percentages, and on the bottom is the raw numbers. And then on the right side of the screen, you have those confidence intervals, so you can see where those do or don't overlap. And then beyond that, for additional context, for the background section of this, we also pulled in the number of sexual violence victims from our state UCR data. Idaho's a neighbor state, has been for a long time, so we were able to get that pretty easily. And then we also pulled the number of victims served from our victim service agencies from their federal grant reporting. So what did we learn? Well, we learned that over 13% of adult Idahoans have experienced sexual violence at some point in their life, which equates to roughly 159,000 adults. And just in 2021, we had over 13,000 people had reported that they had experienced sexual violence within the past 12 months. This is a much higher number than the numbers that we pulled out of both our victim service data and our state crime data. You can see the numbers on your screen, just a little over 4,000 for victims served through those victim service programs, and less than 700 reported to law enforcement. So like I was saying earlier, even though we've had that data and we use it quite a bit, we were still missing just a massive number of people that had never come in contact with either one of those two systems. Interestingly, we did not find any statistical differences in just the prevalence of sexual violence between the 7 public health districts. All of those confidence intervals overlapped, and so no one area of the state was higher or lower than any other. What we did find, though, is that there are some demographic differences that put certain groups at more at risk for experiencing sexual violence. Some examples of those would be people who are between the ages of 18 and 34, people who have an income that's below the household, what does HSB stand for? Household survival budget threshold, which is set by the United Way. That's part of their ALICE program, and I can get into that more next week at the Brown Bag, if you're not familiar with that terminology. Individuals who are female are more likely to experience sexual violence than males. And finally, those who identify as part of the LGBTQ community had much higher rates of sexual violence than other groups. Finally, when it comes to child sexual abuse, the numbers were pretty similar here. 13.5% was our estimate for that. And again, no differences between any one public health district and the state average. But we did find that public health district 5 was lower than any of the other health districts, but not different from the state average, which I thought was interesting. And finally, here we were able to look at the types of child sexual abuse as well. And I'll get into this a little bit further next week if you're interested in hearing about that. Finally, health outcomes. So we found that out of those 42 health outcomes we looked at, 11, they're people who had experienced sexual violence at some point in their lifetime, had reported higher rates of 11 of these adverse health outcomes, which cover mental and physical health, covers substance use. It even covers access to medical care is something we found was an issue for this population too. And so without getting too far into this now, I'll wait until next week to dive more into this. But 11 out of those 42 is a lot of adverse health outcomes for victims of sexual violence to be dealing with. And so we thought that was important to call out. And then finally, people who had experienced sexual violence people who had experienced sexual violence also had higher ACE scores compared to those who did not. And you can see all these on your screen. I'll go into these a little bit more next week. In the interest of time, I will just tease you with that for now. And so here are our conclusions written out. I don't need to go over these again since I just told you about them. But the main point here is at the bottom. We determined in talking to the program managers and some other people who work in this space that this data was really important in demonstrating the need for a more coordinated response to sexual violence, both when it comes to prevention and response after the fact. And mostly because of those health outcomes that are experienced later on in life. If you get to those and you mitigate those early on, then that can really improve the quality of life for people even years down the road after an incidence of violence may have happened. And so this was really important for them to understand and have the data to kind of demonstrate why that's important and why we need to strengthen those programs. And I will leave it there for now, but if you want to know more, please come back to the brown bag next week that George mentioned, and I will turn it back over to George. George, you're muted.
Thank you, Thomas. Well done. And yes, please, people sign up for the brown bag next week to hear more about this great study. Susan Halley reminds me that you can find copies of all the award-winning publications and links to the winning dashboards on JIRN's website. And Susan's provided that in the chat. We will move promptly to our next award winner. And I'll cue that up right now. We're going to hear from the Wyoming SAC. The large SAC winner in the management and statistical policy category is the Wyoming SAC for addressing intimate partner homicide in Wyoming, a comprehensive analysis of fatalities from 2014 through 2023. The judge's comments sums up why it received high scores. The report provides clear, concise, consistent definitions and methods, transparent discussion of data limitations, and a well-organized narrative that helps make complex case-level data accessible. Lena Diekert will share about this publication over the next 10 minutes. Thank you, Lena.
Hi, let me see, get this to share. Okay, hopefully you're looking at my PowerPoint. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lena Diekert. I'm a research scientist at the Wyoming Survey and Analysis Center. We are a university-based SAC located here at the University of Wyoming in Laramie. And I'm honored to be here today and on behalf of my whole team to talk with you about such an important issue as intimate partner homicide in our state. Although I have to admit, I wish I was not here with you today. Giving this presentation just means that people died. We had 56 people who lost their lives in order for this report to exist. So I just want to acknowledge that my team and I were painfully aware as we went through this process that behind each one of these data points is a person, a family, and a community that has been forever changed. Okay, so our current study, our goal was pretty straightforward. We wanted to identify the main risk factors contributing to domestic violence homicide in our state with the hope that we might be able to prevent some future deaths. And to do this, we worked with our Division of Victim Services a little bit to see what ideas they had in mind. And they recommended, and we chose to simulate the process of a formal domestic violence fatality review board, which has never really been done before in the state of Wyoming. They're pretty prevalent in the United States. 45 states, I believe, have a formal fatality review board, but Wyoming is not one of them. So our report is pretty lengthy. I think we ended up organizing it into 9 different chapters. And our goal was that any audience that picked up this report would be able to read it and understand it, but also skip to whatever chapter would answer the questions that they had. So you don't have to read the whole report to understand what's going on. So for this presentation, I want to talk to you a little bit more about our findings, but I hope you would come to the brown bag session next week if you want to learn more about the methods, because I would love to talk about that more too. And just really quick, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with domestic violence fatality review boards, so I wanted to just give a really quick definition here on the screen. But basically, these are just boards that are made up of teams of people from all different backgrounds, law enforcement, healthcare, service providers, school personnel, who all work together to review the circumstances around a domestic violence fatality when it occurs. And they basically reconstruct and try to piece it together to understand where there might have been gaps and what can be done to make sure that it never happens again. So most of the time, from what I understand, states will choose 1 to 2 fatalities to review each year because of time constraints. And I think a lot of the people who serve on these boards are volunteers. However, the wonderful thing about Wyoming is we are tiny. So we decided that we would actually look at every single domestic violence fatality that had happened in our state over a 10-year period. So all of them from 2014 through 2023. I don't want to spend too much time here since we're limited in time today, but you can look and see that we really did everything we could to get as much data as possible. And if you kind of just look through this list, you'll see we have death data, we have criminal history records, we've got police reports, coroner's dockets, obituaries, newspapers, everything you can imagine that we could get our hands on, we pulled for this report. And we built a large access database so that we could keep track of all the information we could possibly find about the victims and the perpetrators. And really this project, the goal was to build the capacity of the SAC, and we were able to do that with all these data sources because a lot of these were things that we'd never tapped into before. So that was exciting to be able to use all these new data. For our case identification, we started out by requesting a list of complete homicide, a whole list of victims from the state of Wyoming from 2014 through 2023, which was a total of 254 people. From there, we narrowed the list down using sources like the Wyoming Silent Witness Initiative, keyword searches, police reports, things like that. And we also decided at this point to narrow our criteria to specifically intimate partner homicides because we started to notice some really serious differences between domestic violence between like siblings or parents and children, just household members in general, versus specifically intimate partners. So after we narrowed down to intimate partner, we had 42 potential cases, which we then worked with our Division of Victim Services again to cross-check with their victim compensation claim records. They had burial compensation data that we were able to use. And then we reached out to law enforcement, 23 agencies in total. We received 33 reports covering 32 incidents. A couple of law enforcement agencies did not give us reports or could not give us reports because investigations were pending. We also reached out to coroners in the 14 counties in Wyoming that we had homicides in, and I think we received 30 of our coroner's dockets. So using all this information, we built a database with all the victim and offender details, relationships, case circumstances, everything you can imagine. And we ultimately excluded 2 more cases because while they were intimate partners who had caused the death of their partner, we decided they didn't happen inside the context of domestic violence. So we ended with a final count of 40 intimate partner homicides for the study. So moving on to the findings, like I said, total of 40 cases overall this study. We included every single case that we could find, but that being said, we are certain that 40 was an undercount and that there are people who are missing in this data. For example, we know that there's cases where someone might take their own life to escape abuse. That would be considered an intimate partner homicide, but they're not going to be captured in our data because we wouldn't have any way to find them in our homicide data set. So just to keep in mind, this list is as complete as we could make it, but we want to acknowledge that it's more of a sample and not a census. There's a lot more victims than we could do justice for here. Key trends, on average, 1 man and 3 women are killed by their intimate partner each year in the state of Wyoming. Like I said, we had 40 cases, so that explains the 40 primary victims. However, there was a total of 56 deaths that were recorded across these 40 incidents. And that is because 13 of the perpetrators killed themselves after killing the primary victim. And 3 of those murder-suicides also involved the death of a child, which gives us those 3 collateral victims. And then I've got a map here. I don't know how familiar everyone is with Wyoming. We're kind of small and in the middle of nowhere, but this shows you our spread. 14 of our 23 counties had at least one homicide in them. So then moving on to demographics, 83% of our victims were female. The median age for both the male and female victims was 41 years. Most common education level was a high school diploma or GED, which was followed by college credit without a degree. And most of our victims, when we were able to find their employment status, were employed. For perpetrators, if you're keeping track from the last slide, we had 83 victims that were female. You'll see we have 83% of them were female. For the perpetrators, 83% are male. That's because every single one of our homicides took place between 2 people of the opposite sex. Perpetrators were a little bit older on average than the victims were. And education, this is where we start to get into some of our trouble with data. I think we only had education information on 7 of the 40 perpetrators because this data is so hard to get a hold of. So we didn't want to comment too much on education. And when we were able to find employment data, most weren't employed. Moving on to, we took a look at the relationship dynamics in these cases. Almost all of our cases happened between current intimate partners. I think only 3 occurred between ex-dating or ex-marital partners. With our current partners, half married, half dating, pretty even split. And then I just wanted to point out here that at least 41% had expressed a desire to leave. At least 60% had been abused in the past, and at least 30% had told their family and friends that their partner had threatened to kill them before. So I think it's really important to call attention to the fact that these are all at least statistics. These are certainly undercounts. We're going off of public records, police reports, what the neighbors heard, what the family members know, what the perpetrator reported. But there's a lot that goes on behind closed doors that we just don't have any way to comment on here. So keep in mind how conservative these numbers are, but let it sink in still how high these percentages came out to be, even though we know they're conservative. And then when we were able to estimate the relationship length in cases, most often they were between 1 and 5 years. And the most common location for these homicides was inside a shared home and most often inside of a shared bedroom. Means of death, we took a look here using death data. This graph kind of shows you the breakdown of what we have. It's this one's broken out by sex. Pretty overwhelmingly shows you that most of the homicides were perpetrated with a firearm. Probably not a surprise anywhere, certainly not a surprise in Wyoming. For females, the next most common manner of death was blunt force trauma, and then for males, stab wounds. We do a deeper dive into the firearm-related deaths, and I would love to talk more about that in the brown bag session, but I don't think we have time today. And then as far as motive goes, again, coming entirely from police reports and public information, we are at the mercy of what other people believed the motive was, whether this is what the neighbors heard being yelled, what the perpetrator actually reported. Whatever the case, pretty overwhelmingly, we saw that disputes and arguments and perceived infidelity, whether it was real or imagined infidelity, were the leading causes or the leading motives. And you'll notice a lot of cases did not have just a single motive, and that is why these percents are so big. And then really quickly here, we also took a look at criminal history records. You'll see most of our perpetrators had a pretty violent past. You see a lot of arrests here, a lot of domestic violence, a lot of sexual violence, convicted felonies or convicted felons, and 30% prohibited from possessing a firearm. 5 of those 12 individuals did use a firearm to commit their homicides, but pretty lengthy violent histories. And for victims, it was much less going on. We had no felonies, 1 violent arrest. That violent arrest was domestic violence. No protection orders were in place at the time of homicide, which was interesting. We were able to get that information from our Supreme Court. But we were surprised by that a little bit, but not surprised to see that the victims did not have particularly violent histories. And then perpetrator risk factors. We'll go through pretty quick. We can dive into these more next week. Access to firearms, history of violence, criminal history. You'll see that these are pretty high. And again, conservative estimates among victims, people who'd had a history of being abused or had expressed a desire to leave, were often in these situations, which is pretty terrible. And then kind of the most exciting part of our analysis was we were able to retrospectively apply Dr. Jacqueline Campbell's danger assessment, lethality assessment to our 40 cases. And we were able to go through and categorize to basically decide if a lethality assessment had been applied in these cases, would we have been able to not predict, but tell that these individuals were in danger? And what we found is 70% of our victims, the answer is yes. And 30% were in extreme danger. It was an emergency situation that would have been able to been detected had a lethality assessment been used. And then I know we're running out of time here, so really quick, our recommendations were very straightforward. We think Wyoming would benefit from creating a permanent fatality review board. We were able to learn a lot from just our public information that we could get a hold of. We think a permanent review board would be great. And also standardizing lethality assessments in the state of Wyoming, we think might help save lives. We think that these would be a really good tool to keep in the toolbox for our law enforcement officers. And hopefully we can move forward from there. Again, thank you very much for letting me take some of your time today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, or I hope otherwise that we will get to see you in the brown bag next week. Thank you. You are on mute, George.
Thank you, Lena. Great presentation, great visuals. I really enjoyed that. You did the cover is beautiful, as well as the substance of the report. So we are going to pivot to the dashboard data visualization category. Judges were seeking visualizations that effectively communicate complex information in a clear, accessible, and actionable way. The key qualities that make for a strong dashboard or visualization include a clear purpose, effective design, relevance and context, thoughtful visual elements, data integrity, and usability. In the small SAC category, the winner for the data visualization category is Maine for their prosecutorial data dashboard. One judge observed that this dashboard has a very logical and intuitive format. Went on to say that overall, this dashboard provides an effective and informational experience for users. Joining us from the Maine SAC are Julia Bergeron-Smith and Tara Wheeler, and they will showcase their dashboard.
Thank you so much, George. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Bergeron-Smith, and I direct the Maine SAC. We are also a university-based SAC. And before we dive into the prosecutorial data dashboard, I'm going to provide some background about how it came to be. And so actually using SJS fiscal year 21 funding, we first partnered with the Maine Prosecutors Association to produce Maine's first ever report on statewide and district level prosecutorial data trends covering a 5-year period. And that report did focus on 2017 to 2021. And the main body of that report was just under 30 pages, but then it included this really robust appendix of about 70 pages that offered additional data tables, including subsections for each district. And we did this because the DAs identified how helpful this level of data was for them, yet we still wanted a relatively succinct report. So while we were developing that report and having these conversations, we were also starting to hear a bit about Power BI, and we were interested in using it. And additionally, our report made a few recommendations for their data, and that included making a dashboard to make this data easier to engage. So we decided to continue to partner with the Maine Prosecutors Association, this time for an SJS Fiscal Year 22 award, which essentially was converting this report's figures, charts, and tables into an interactive dashboard that could more easily convey the data and also more efficiently incorporate additional years of data. So you'll see that this dashboard does have 2 additional years going up to 2023. And in converting this report into a dashboard, we had to really think about how to best convey the same data in a very different medium, but with a lot less words than a report and certainly a lot less pages. So in addition to streamlining data for prosecutors and getting to enhance our own technical capacity by learning Power BI, our goal for this dashboard was to make this data more transparent and also accessible to all Mainers. And so we do aim to continue adding new years of data to this dashboard. So that's a work in progress. But for now, this is what we have. And I'll turn it over to Tara, our lead data analyst, who eagerly volunteered to learn Power BI in order for this dashboard to be created.
Yeah. Thank you, Julia, for that introduction and providing that background. I will say that this was our first foray into Power BI, and it was quite daunting. But having that framework of we already had a report, we already knew what visuals to put into the dashboard and what to display and how to and kind of the layout of it, that really helped us get over that learning curve in the hurdle. So here is our dashboard, and it's broken into the data itself is broken into 4 tabs, and it mimics kind of the sections of the report. We have an overview, which is just, high level data. Then we talk about cases referred to prosecutors. And then we have another tab for case charges. That's all the charges within those cases. And finally, we talk about case outcomes. Well, our dashboard shows case outcomes. But so on this overview tab, we're primarily displaying number of cases by year. And
no, that's the washing machine. Never mind.
Sorry, someone talking? Oh, oh sorry. But so there's we're displaying number of cases by year, and this was very interesting. So we decided to do it by district because it's cross functionality. So if I look at District 3, it changes the other charts, so having that district there allowed for us to also for the user to also look at defendant characteristics by district. And then this chart also includes a drill down function to go by quarters. And as an analyst, I just found this interesting because when I did the original analysis for the report, I never looked at quarters, and then seeing the data here and that, oh, wow, across the board, across all districts and across all years too, that just Q3, it has the most cases referred. Most cases are, the largest number of cases are referred in Q3, which is summertime in Maine, which is lovely. So that was just an interesting finding. Then if we go for cases referred, we're displaying information about the case as a whole. So case type and case class are determined by the highest level charge. So, Class A offense is higher than a Class B offense. So the most serious charge. And we also included slicers here. So a user can look at a specific district, and they can also look at a specific year. So if we want to say, like, looking at 21 and 22, here's the data for that. And, as with all Power BI charts, it's interactive. What are the case types for the cases that have 3+ charges? And we'll see that, most of them are personal offenses. Just interesting information. One cool thing is the slicer information here gets saved on any other tab the slicers appear on. So if we go to case charges, now those multiple selections are still saved over here. And for case charges, we are displaying the same, pretty much the same information as cases referred, except for we included this top 10 charges. And something that Julia and I both found something that was kind of exciting was when we first displayed this information to prosecutors about top 10 charges for the report. We did this for the report. They were so excited to see this because it was confirming what they had already known, but they never had the data to prove. And they were able to, and they had been telling legislatures, what their top charge was for years, but they had never had the data to prove that. And so it did end up resulting in them being able to say, here's the data, and it resulted in legislative changes. And so just looking at 2023 top 10 charges, it will change. We have a change just because of some legislative changes. Like if we go to, so now operating after suspension, which was decriminalized for most types of operating after suspension, is now moved way low, much lower. Oops, I meant to say all. And then finally, we have our case outcomes tab. And before I show that, what I want to show is this flow chart. So this trying to determine how to calculate outcomes was very difficult because you have to remove cases from your denominator at each stage. And so we made this chart actually with the prosecutors before we even did the report, was just trying to figure out how to calculate outcomes and how to consider outcomes. So then one thing that was very technically difficult was thinking about how can we translate this chart, which is one stagnant chart, flow chart, into an interactive dashboard. And for us, that solution was using cards and measures. So for those familiar with Power BI, you'll know what I mean by measures, but for those not, a measure is basically a formula. It's almost like an Excel formula that you specifically write. So we were able to translate this. And Power BI doesn't really have a flow chart, many flow chart options that I found. So this was quite the task. And Julie and I really had to put our heads together to try to convey this information in a understandable way. And I'm sure there's probably better ways to have done it, but I was pretty pleased with the overall result because it is kind of intuitive with the flow charts. And, we can look at public order offenses and filter and use our slicers. So it gives good information about outcomes and is interactive. And finally, we put our notes, our methodologies, and any definitions in our notes tab. So that's kind of the overview of the dashboard of what we did. If we have a longer presentation, we can go into more of like how to go about those measures and thinking through how to recreate a flow chart and a dashboard. But we've learned a lot, and this was very simple and in comparison to some of the dashboards we're making now, but it was a very helpful capacity building process.
Thank you, Tara and Julia. Very good. I love the simplicity of the graphics. They convey exactly what you need. I think it's well done. So let's keep going with data dashboards and visualization. Our large SAC dashboard winner is the New Jersey SAC for New Jersey traffic fatalities. One judge particularly highlighted the initial landing description and tips for use. Another said a very powerful feature of this dashboard is that the final tab allows users to download the complete data sets. And Kristen Golden will give us a look at this dashboard. I will turn it over to Kristen here.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about our New Jersey traffic fatality dashboard. This is a project that was built in conjunction with, am I sharing my screen? Yes, I think so. Okay. Built in conjunction with our Division of Highway Traffic Safety in the Office of the Attorney General, and our state police office. In New Jersey, every day traffic fatalities are reported to the state police. They're actually refreshed on a website right here. And then annually, the state police had published a fatal crash report. It was 45 pages of different tables and charts, but there was no sort of longitudinal analysis other than a single chart here or there talking about annual trends. Additionally, the usefulness of a static PDF report had kind of come and gone. So this dashboard was built out of one, needs to serve the public, but also needs to serve our Division of Highway Traffic Safety and State Police. This is one of about a dozen dashboards that we have. Generally, we try to format them all in the same way, giving the user an overview of the dashboard, links to all sorts of different things. Our goal here in New Jersey is transparency. So as long as we can, we have a link to download the data. I'll highlight that first because, our charts and figures are wonderful. But other users actually want the data. It's supposed to appear here. Of course, it's not right now. There you go. It loads eventually. So these are all the historic data files for crashes back through 2006. And then this dashboard is updated daily. So our staff updated this earlier today. So we have two primary sources of data for this information. One is fatal crashes that are refreshed on a daily basis. And then two is the completed crash investigation reports that have been vetted by Department of Transportation in New Jersey and federally. So any information for the past 2 years right now is displaying our daily reports of fatal crashes that gets notified to state police. Anything historic is using those confirmed fatal crash investigation reports. As I said, this report was meant to replace this PDF report that was issued on an annual basis. So we have lots of different, they're technically parameters, but they look like filters to users, different ways to sort of customize the visualizations. I'm not sure if you can see the drop-down menu. Sometimes it doesn't come through on screen shares, but if we wanted to look at this specifically for youth passenger vehicle fatalities, we could filter this entire page to view only those crashes that involved a youth passenger who died. And we can see the trend there, fatalities by involvement. We can also filter by different time periods. The data are comprehensively back to 2006. Back to 2023 is just the general information only. We can filter by county, municipality. In New Jersey, we have 21 counties. We also have, over 500 municipalities. Involvement would be the person who was killed, driver, passenger, or pedestrian. And we can also filter by law enforcement agency reporting the crash. So the usefulness of this sort of spans a number of different stakeholders. One, local communities can look at this to view information about their community, what's going on there, any trends that they're seeing. We can also view this this chart over here. We can filter to look at the rate of fatal crashes by county. We're still on youth passenger vehicle fatalities. So what we can see here is Sussex County has one of the higher rates per vehicle, millions of miles of vehicle miles traveled, which is a standard that we use here in New Jersey. We can view fatal crashes by quarter or by hour of the day. So if we wanted to see the time, again, we're still looking at youth pedestrian crashes here. They peak in the 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. hour. This dashboard also uses a lot of terms that are terms of art for anyone who is filling out fatal crash reports or individuals who are in the highway traffic safety space. So we provided definitions here just to ensure that users have the same understanding of the terms that we're using as intended. Some very interesting and important things are the information pertaining to test results for alcohol, cannabis, and drugs. That phrase I mentioned before, vehicle miles traveled, is how we're sort of measuring standardizing the rates of fatal crashes. The rest of the dashboard is going to deal primarily with our historic data sets. So in detail, we have data back to 2006, but this is a historic trend dating back to the 1960s. And we've added in here some super relevant information that might have impacted the trends of crashes. So anywhere you see a green dotted line, that is some sort of regulation, either at a state level or federal level, that involved safety equipment. So in 1969, front headrests became mandatory. In 2018, backup cameras became required in new vehicles. So we're sort of giving the user information that might help explain the trends that we're seeing. Overall, the US trend, which is this gray line over here, decreases since the 1960s. New Jersey also decreases at a slightly faster rate. These black dotted lines represent policy and legislation. Some of these are specific to New Jersey, some of them are not. In 2008, this line is New Jersey banned texting while driving, so we see a little decrease there. 1988 would be the national minimum for drinking age, which had an impact on drunk driving on a federal level. So this allowed us to give context to the anyone in the public who's looking at this, anyone without any sort of context on highway traffic safety or federal regulations that might impact these trends. I need to click that. We can also, right now, this is displaying all fatalities. If you wanted to view this for specific pedestrians or motorcycles, you can also look at that there. Our historic rates are going to be the same thing. It's just standardized by vehicle miles traveled. It's roughly the same chart, just on a separate page for space purposes. We also provide considerable details about our crashes. If anyone has ever been to New Jersey or, made a joke at New Jersey's expense where we say, what exit are you from? That would be this highway over here. These dots are density dots. They are absolutely tracking our major throughways and thoroughfares. So this is the New Jersey Turnpike going this way, and this is the Parkway going this way. This would be the highways coming from Philadelphia to Atlantic City and the shore. Obviously, this is up near New York, and our highways that go into Pennsylvania, I-80 and 287. So this information is, provided as a public service. This is the one section of New Jersey where we don't have a lot of roadways or people living. And again, every page is filterable by specific content areas. As we looked before, we looked at youth passenger vehicle fatalities. If you wanted to look at this information for motorcycle drivers, you can, and all of these charts and figures will filter as well. While this loads, we can talk about the types of fatal crash, and these are standard items that are on the federal TR1 report, which is our fatal crash report. So this type of fatal crash, these fields can be multi-selects, contributing circumstances, the number of crashes given specific circumstances. This list is pretty lengthy. Typically, we in OJD would have truncated this a little bit more to provide, better visual representation. But in working with other agencies, they really wanted to see all of this information. So we, allowed our charts to kind of flow over. Looking at the type of highway where the crash occurred as well, also available. And again, we see the same filters where we can filter by year, county, municipality, or agency. And again, because this is our detailed reports, this doesn't have information for fatal crashes within the last 2 years. That's why this year filter only goes to 2023. Crash conditions, we'll talk about weather, lighting, and road conditions. And again, you can filter and view all crashes. We have some highlighted interstate highways here. Garden State Parkway is, one of our largest thoroughfares. It's the roadway that goes closest to the shore from North Jersey, has the largest proportion of our fatal crashes. This information is, again, filterable by all these other areas as well. So then we shift from talking about crash as the unit of analysis to talking about people as our units of analysis. Obviously, within any vehicle, there can be one or multiple persons. We shift to talking about the number of persons who were killed here. As we were going through this, we sort of had some areas of specific interest. Number one, there were concerns about younger drivers. New Jersey had made some changes to underage consumption of alcohol, marijuana, and regulations around that. Previously, it would have led to an automatic pause or inability to get your license when you turn 17 in New Jersey. Now there's just some warnings issued, and those individuals are getting licenses. So there were policy concerns that we might see changes to fatalities in that area. So as those conversations are happening, we're also having conversations about older drivers. And so we have sort of canned age ranges that change the structure of this chart right here. So right now, this sort of expands the age groups between the ages of 14 to 24. So you can see the gap here's two to 3 years in these younger ages. When we shift to focus on adults who are over 60, that age group of 14 to 24 is now truncated for those 10 to 19, 20 to 29. And then our age range for older adults has, we've expanded that, so we have more categories for older adults here. We can set it at 5-year or 10-year intervals. A lot of this dashboard really was built for stakeholders in the highway traffic safety space to be able to look at data pretty quickly in a way that would make sense for them and serve their purpose. So a lot of these categories are here as well. I'm trying to stick to time, so I'm going through this pretty quick, but we'll have more information later. This is my absolute favorite visualization here. The analyst who created this for us, unfortunately, is unwell today, and he's not here, but I had asked for one of the data points that are in the crash reports are where on the vehicle the impact point was, the initial impact point. And I said, well, let's put it on a car. So of course he was able to do that for us. So these are the data fields on the report, 12 o'clock, starting with the top of the car and just going around the clock that way. So all of this information, again, available by the same filters, the same fields that we've been talking about all along. This will provide more information about the vehicle, the type of vehicle, the purpose of the vehicle, use and travel of the vehicle. And then our last two data pages are going to talk about alcohol and drugs and cannabis in crashes. So one of the quick stats that our Highway Traffic Safety Division uses is the percentage of fatalities of drivers that tested positive for alcohol, drugs, or cannabis in a given year. So in 2023, that was 55%. We can look at the percentage of test results for alcohol, drug tests, and cannabis tests. There's some information here that says what's this. If you can't see the hover text, I apologize. It doesn't always come through on shares. If you can see it, great. Cannabis testing results are reported separately from drug test results beginning in 2021. So prior to 2021, cannabis test results were included in drug test results. Now cannabis test results are reported separately. So these positives and negatives are really only available for the years 2021 and later. And again, we can see positive test result trends over time, whether that's changing or increasing. And just to kind of hone in on that cannabis testing report, cannabis testing pattern. Cannabis testing wasn't done before 2021, so it doesn't exist in the data. But alcohol and general drug testing has increased. Interestingly, as we implemented cannabis testing, we see a decrease in our positive drug testing results, and that's because the positive is on the cannabis test instead of the general drug test as well. Diving a little bit deeper into alcohol testing, this is information.
Kristen, we're running short on time, so
okay.
If you could, yeah. Right.
The last page.
Okay, thank you.
So this just gives information on the range of blood alcohol content on all fatal crashes. And then our last page has some FAQs, questions that we received about the data, questions that we had about the data that might be helpful to the public. That's it. Thanks, George.
Kristen, thank you so much. I'm sorry I had to kind of interrupt you. We will be scheduling another brown bag with the data visualization winners so that they can go even a little deeper for those of you who are interested in that subject. But we will move on to our last category. Our final category is research policy analysis publications. Reports in this category pose one or more specific research or evaluation questions and typically employ a specific research designed to address the issues raised. They usually involve the collection and analysis of data, either quantitative or qualitative, summarize findings, and offer conclusions and recommendations. For this category, the small SAC winner is Michigan for driving while broke, the role of class signals in police discretion. One judge noted it's a very innovative study design. With us are Scott Wolf and Jed Node to tell us about this work, and I'll let them take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, George. Good afternoon, everybody. As George said, my name is Scott Wolf. I'm the director of the Michigan Justice Statistics Center here in Michigan, which is obviously our state's SAC. Big thank you to JIRN for the award. We're humbled by it. Really awesome to receive this recognition, and obviously big thanks to BJS for providing us the funding to be able to do this type of work. Two things we're going to do today. I'm going to give a brief introduction, kind of what the Michigan Justice Statistics Center looks like, because we're one of the kind of the oddballs out in that we're housed in a university, like our colleagues there at Wyoming. And then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, who is one of our star doctoral students here at Michigan State University School of Criminal Justice, who's the mastermind behind this paper. And so yeah, I'll jump into it. So, like I said, we are Michigan SAC. We're housed in MSU's School of Criminal Justice. It's operated here for a long period of time, earmarked by the governor back in the early 90s. Like many of the other small statistical analysis centers, we have a small staff, and in fact, technically speaking, we kind of don't have a full-time staff because our work is entirely funded by BJS in related sources of funding. But we have a good time anyways, even though we have a small staff of folks. Just a brief overview, at least historically over the years, what our center has focused on. Obviously, like many of you all, we've spent some time working with NIBRS data. We call that MICR here in Michigan Incident-Based Criminal Reporting. We do a lot of work with various stakeholders around our state, whether it's criminal justice agencies or community groups that obviously have contact with the criminal justice system. So we do a lot of surveys in schools and communities with criminal justice agencies themselves, just as an example. And then, what we're going to talk about with you all today is racial disparity work that my team and I have been working on over the past couple of years with the Michigan State Police, who is our state administrative agency. So back in started in about 2021 when I first started to take over as director of Michigan SAC. Michigan State Police as our state administrative agency, we've worked with a lot in the past. It kind of worked out nicely during that transition in leadership for the center. Is they reached out and wanted to get ahead of some of the things that they were getting a sense of the public not being happy with in terms of racial disparities in their traffic stops. Obviously, a big topic of conversation in the criminal justice literature and in practitioner circles for a long period of time. And so we started working with them a number of years ago. And basically, over the past 5 years, what we've tried to do with them is kind of on an annual basis, trying to dive deeper each year into MSP's racial disparity statistics to give them a fuller picture of the extent to which disparities exist within the agency, and then also give them an idea of what may be useful in moving forward to try to reduce some of those numbers. So we started with high-level benchmarking back in 2021, moved into more sophisticated analyses, in particular veil of darkness, to try to get some quasi-experimental evidence in their hands. And then a lot of that work ended up culminating into a dashboard that MSP created that was intended to basically get information in the hands of their troopers and their supervisors to make them more aware of some of their traffic stop disparity numbers to hopefully reduce those over time. They were kind enough to agree to a randomized controlled trial that we evaluated that dashboard. And I can talk about the results of that at a different time. And then most recently, we're doing some more spatial focused analyses for the agency. And our overall function, especially working with a partner like a state police, is to produce information, data for them that they find useful, that can be actionable. So obviously, we're doing a lot of presentations with staff at the agency, command staff down to analysts, producing reports for them. And then obviously, to help speak to a broader academic literature, we oftentimes translate those reports into peer-reviewed publications, which is what Jed will talk about now. Over to you, Jed.
There we go. Sorry about that. Was just trying to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you to everyone else here who's taken the time to be with us today. So let's talk about this study. With the breadth of what police work entails, police officers are afforded considerable discretion. This discretion is necessary because the job requires flexibility and adaptability to juggle the competing demands of state laws, departmental policies, and the need for individualized justice. Understanding the unique circumstances of the individual is a very human and part of what makes someone good at this job. But the latitude of discretion decision-making afforded police opens the door for things like discrimination. A key element of police work is observing cues that indicate a person is dangerous or otherwise suspicious. These cues sum to form a mental image of the typical person who would engage in criminal actions. But the thing is, the image of what's typical is largely driven by intuition and past experience, and it can sometimes lead to incorrect conclusions, even if they're based on very real intuition. So, for example, visible anxiety in a driver, this may very well be because someone is engaged in criminal activity, or it might be because someone's afraid of police subjecting them to violence, as is often the case for citizens construed as black or brown. If visible anxiety leads police to request consent for a search more often, that might contribute to racial disparities, such that non-white drivers are more frequently searched, but contraband is less frequently recovered. And that relationship has been really heavily researched at this point. But there are other aspects of the typical that have been less explored. I'm sure some of you have heard some variation of the quote from cops, the I don't profile people, but I do profile cars. And often this idea extends to very specific models. I've heard a lot with Chevy Impalas, the classic black Dodge Charger. These beaters or dirtbag cars may thus be more suspicious and deserving of attention, but we don't have much empirical evidence on whether these signals of driver class impact policing outcomes. So that leads to this current study, where we aim to do three things. First, we want to operationalize driver social class because it hasn't really been done before in one of the most common contexts where police interact with citizens, traffic stops, for which the vehicle someone is driving is likely extremely important. Next, we decided to look at these visual class signals in a common context where it would be used to inform suspicion, discretionary search decisions, and the outcomes of those decisions, so contraband recovery. And as I said, past research suggested that when suspicion was conflated with factors like perceptions of driver race, searches were more frequent, but less likely to result in the contraband recovery. So we expect a similar pattern to potentially emerge here where vehicles signaling lower class would be searched more frequently, but these searches would be less efficient. Finally, we want to also look at the interactivity between the construction of class and race, because that itself has also been kind of underexplored in this context. So to generate vehicle values, we first generated a list of all unique combinations of vehicle makes, models, and years in the data that we had. And then we plugged these into a function I wrote that essentially collected the values for each of these combinations from a really popular auto selling website that had both used and new cars. And then we took the median of those values. This is imperfect, but for example, we don't know whether or not a car was dirty on the outside. We don't know whether or not it had damage, but it's a good foundation for future research to kind of expand on this and do better things in the future. So in order to solve the questions that we had, again, like looking at whether or not class impacts these policing outcomes, we partnered with a large state police agency to analyze over 500,000 stops in the years 2022 and 2023. We have two outcomes, again, that we're interested in for our analyses, the probability of a search and the probability of contraband recovery. Our research designed to predict these outcomes is broken into two big steps. We've first got design and then analysis. In that design step, we use a set of matching variables that we expect to be related to the outcome, and we use that to predict vehicle value. So this is pretty exhaustive. We have the driver-related variables, so like the age of driver, sex, race, and whether the plate was out of state, that sort of thing. We also have area variables, for example, the income associated with the driver, crime rate, and the demographics associated with the neighborhood as well. And then we have stop variables like time of day, stop type, and level of discretion. And then after we have done this, what we do is we have the analysis step where we just use that vehicle value to predict whichever outcome we're interested in. We have, again, the contraband recovery is one of those, and then the decision to search a vehicle is the other one. And the reason that we have this kind of two-stage process is we can't randomly assign vehicles to have a certain value. So instead, we kind of approximate random assignment, and that gives us good causal inference about whether or not these things are taking place. So what did we find? Essentially, for every time a vehicle value doubles, a driver is 17.2% less likely to be subject to a discretionary search. This is extremely significant. I didn't bother sharing p-value because it has enough zeros it wouldn't fit on the screen if I typed it out in 12-point Times New Roman. But it's particularly shaped by consent searches, which are the majority of searches in our sample. But drivers still 7.4% less likely to be subject to a probable cause search for every doubling in vehicle value. This was also the case when breaking things down by race, though the strength of this relationship changed. So The kind of brief way of saying this is that the effect of social class on search decisions was twice as strong for white drivers as for Hispanic drivers, and 4 times as strong for white drivers as for Black drivers. So when you first hear that, you might initially think, okay, so white drivers were discriminated against based on class most. And yes, but maybe not how you're thinking. So class was the most impactful for white drivers, which is that green line right there. But if you look at the highest class signaling Black drivers, which is that purple line, you can see that actually the highest class signaling Black drivers were searched more often than the lowest class signaling white drivers. And importantly, class was also the most important in high income areas specifically. So a doubling in vehicle value led to a 21% reduction in search likelihood in high income areas, whereas with low income areas, it was only around a 7% reduction. And this can really be construed as, in other words, the more out of place a vehicle was, the more likely it was for it to be searched. And we found a strikingly similar relationship in the inverse for contraband recovery, where a doubling in vehicle value led to a 20.5% roughly increased likelihood of contraband recovery. However, when running subgroup analyses, this relationship was only really significant for Black and Hispanic drivers. And that kind of suggests, too, in tandem with some of the other evidence we have, that it might be driven by searches in lower income areas, as our estimate of vehicle value on the likelihood of contraband recovery for high income areas was not significant. So with that, I'm just going to pass that back to you, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Jed. So yeah, to kind of recap, just to put it simply, the main takeaway from this analysis, social class matters, at least measured in the way that we did so. So it kind of confirms what Jed mentioned, the anecdotal kind of feedback from cops you get a lot of times is they're not using race as an indicator of whether to stop a car or not, but out of place cars or other characteristics. For example, social class is indicated by the value of a car, and decided to pull that over. Again, race and class are interactive in that really important way, demonstrating another layer of disparate treatment, particularly for people of color. And lots of implications we could talk about. One that Jed and I have talked about with MSP in the past and other agencies is the role of consent searches. Cops are, depending on the types of agency you're talking about, are often it's very common for them to ask for a search to be conducted, because the person they stop can say yes or no. The problem with that is it's demeaning, can be perceived as demeaning in the eyes of the person. The cops may do that every day, but it's not every day that you as a citizen are asked that question. And what we see from a lot of research, including our own, is those consent searches, when they're conducted, are not very effective. They rarely yield contraband, and so basically the question becomes: is the juice worth the squeeze? So yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you all.
Scott and Jed, thanks so much. Very interesting. I think there's some questions in the chat, but we need to hold on because I think we're running a little late on time. So the last speaker, our final awardee is the large SAC winner. Is in this category is Wisconsin for treatment alternatives and diversion. TAD program 2019 to 2023. For this report, one of the judges stated that the authors did a great job relating the material for scholars, policymakers, and practitioners. And Ashley Billig from Wisconsin will tell us more about the report. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, George. Can you hear me okay? Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much to JIRN for hosting this conference, the opportunity to talk about this project a little bit, and to everyone for sticking with us at the end of the day today. Our report was about our Wisconsin Treatment Alternatives and Diversion Program. Our SAC is required to complete a 5-year evaluation once every 5 years, including a cost-benefit analysis. And so the focus is really the cost-benefit analysis That's sort of the main question that we are aimed at answering. And this is a requirement by statute. So our evaluation components included an executive summary. We have a section in our report describing the participants in these programs. These are treatment courts and diversion programs. As of a couple of years ago, calendar year 2023, the program funded about $9.7 million worth of programming, and that included about 90 different programs across the state. So we have a participant overview of the people who are in those programs participating. Part of that participant overview also included some data collected from the participants themselves about how they felt they were treated in the program. We also have a qualitative part of the evaluation, talking specifically through some impacts of COVID. Obviously, the 5-year span of 2019 through 2023 has the pandemic right in the middle, which is really great, right, for evaluation purposes. So we have a section sort of talking about some pandemic impacts. We have a recidivism analysis, and then finally our cost-benefit analysis with some recommendations. So just to kind of give you an idea, these graphics in the beginning couple of slides here show the number of people who are being referred to a program. In gray, those individuals are referred to a program, but they are not actually admitted to a program. So part of the report actually also describes some of the reasons why people are not admitted to the programs. The bars in blue there are the numbers of people who were admitted to a treatment court program during one of these 5 years. Those who were discharged from a program, a treatment court program, these are the numbers of how they were discharged. They either graduated successfully, they were terminated, or they had some other kind of discharge type. And that includes things like administrative discharges, like if they moved out of the county, etc. For the diversion programs, we have the same type of information displayed. Lots of people being referred to these programs, but also unfortunately a lot not getting into the program for various reasons. Mostly a lot of people graduating from the diversion program, so we're seeing a lot of success in terms of following the program guidelines and compliance. One thing I wanted to mention is that Chris Henning presented a little bit earlier about the big data warehouse that our SAC has been working on with other criminal justice partners in Wisconsin. And so we were actually able to use that warehouse and how arrest data and court data can be linked together to do our recidivism analysis. The warehouse was specifically really helpful in finding information about individuals who are participants in these programs. We collect their information through a separate system, and part of what we collect is the person's state identification number. So that helps us identify who they are in our criminal history repository, regardless of how their name came in, how it's spelled, if it first and last name is backwards or whatnot. So we were able to use the warehouse to find the state IDs that were missing, that the programs didn't know, but we were able to find them. So that was super helpful. We also used our warehouse to create some comparison groups and run the overall recidivism analysis. So for the recidivism piece, we looked at 3 different events. We looked at offenses that occurred after the person was discharged from the program that led to an arrest or a charge or a conviction. We looked at this at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 years after the person was out of the program. We have this split into different offense categories and subcategories. We looked at it based on overall participants versus just those who graduated versus just those who were terminated. And then we also, like I said, had 2 different comparison groups with different methodology. So this is our recidivism kind of overall. This is treatment court participants. Treatment court participants are generally much higher risk and have much higher needs, significant substance abuse disorders. Or I should say substance use disorders. So they're already sort of a pretty high risk for for recidivism. So we were looking at an arrest after program discharge, a charge after a program discharge, and or a conviction after program discharge. And so the gray bars here are everyone combined for treatment court programs. The blue in the middle is those who were terminated, and the dark blue are those who graduated. So probably not surprising, the ones who graduated had a lower recidivism, and those who were terminated had a higher recidivism. When we're looking at these different 5-year follow-up periods, probably not surprising that it grows year after year, and then it kind of stabilizes out after the 4th year there for treatment court programs. Same information for diversion participants. Again, the gray is everyone combined who were discharged from a program. The one in the lighter blue is those who were terminated, compared to those in the darker blue, those who graduated. This is what that information looked like at the different follow-up periods for diversion participants. And then we have our comparison groups. So we have a portion of our much more specific methodology in our report, but essentially we decided to make 2 different comparison groups because there's pros and cons to every way you can create comparison groups. Experimental method is not possible. And so our first comparison group, which we're calling Group A, was made up of people who were referred to a program, but they did not get into the program. We did not include people who didn't want to participate. We only included people who were found ineligible for the program. And then Group B was made up of individuals who were in our criminal history repository who never participated in a program and were never referred to a program. So that's Group B. We're kind of expecting Group A to have a higher recidivism rate because they're referred to a program. There's something about their eligibility that made them ineligible to participate, so they're not getting the services. So we sort of expected them to be higher. We created those comparison groups also with a match group using propensity score matching. So the Group A included matching based on risk and need scores, age, sex, race, what type of offense led to the referral, and I believe that's it for the source of the referral. So whether it was coming from a district attorney, a defense attorney, the source of the referral was also included in the match for Group A. And then the match for Group B was only using demographics of the person and the offense that led to the offense category that led to the arrest. So for Group A, we had a lot more information because they were referred, and we collect information about all referrals. And then Group B had a lot less information to match on because these are people that we don't really know much about other than seeing their arrest records in our criminal history repository. So kind of looking at the comparison here, the gray bar on top is the total treatment court sample. The one in the blue in the middle and the lighter purple on the bottom are the subsets of the participants that were the match groups. So they're all about the same. The darker blue there is the comparison Group A. So as expected, they do have a higher recidivism rate. And then comparison Group B had a lower recidivism rate. We did the same thing for diversion programs. This one was a little bit surprising. This result was kind of the opposite. The comparison Group B actually had higher recidivism than Group A for the diversion participants. And then finally, for our cost-benefit analysis, we needed to collect lots of information to calculate this. This included some programmatic data from another bureau in our division at our agency. So they had all of the budget information about how much state funding was given out and how much was turned back. We also had information about how much these programs charge participants to participate. Some of the programs don't have a fee and some do have a fee, so we collected that. And then we looked at how much it costs to incarcerate someone broken apart by whether they are in jail or whether they are in prison, and their sex, because that cost is different. We collected information from our court system on actual sentencing so that we could estimate the number of days that a person who graduated from a program would have averted had it not been for the program. And then we estimated marginal costs of crime that was averted based on the difference in recidivism between the participant group and the comparison group. And so lots of numbers here. This is the budget information, this is the sentencing information, and this is the averted crime information. And this is kind of the takeaway. This is what our legislature is really the most interested in, is what is this final number for the cost benefit? And we estimated, using all of that information, that for every $1 spent in state funding to support these programs, we are saving anywhere between $5.15 up to $5.92 for those individuals who are in treatment court programs, and anywhere between $8.18 and $9.12 for diversion programs. Looking at the bar chart here, it's, obviously it's the purple that stands out. That is averted incarceration. So even being fairly conservative, estimating the number of days that people are averting because they are in the program, it's a pretty large cost. So even despite the minor differences in recidivism and averted future crime, it's really that cost of incarceration that is kind of leading this cost benefit analysis. We ended the report with just a couple of recommendations. We have lots of programs in the state that are not using this state funding that we don't really know anything about because they don't. They're not required to send any data to our agency. So we would love to be able to get some of their information about the participants in those programs, because the state-funded programs have certain eligibility requirements that the locally funded programs might not have. And we would love to see if there's a difference in success rate in terms of completing the program. We'd also like to understand what it is about the program that leads or may be related to successful outcomes. This report really focuses on recidivism because that's the data that we have access to. But we would love to get additional information about participants so that we can look at other measures of success beyond whether the person is rearrested after their program. And then our Wisconsin DOJ staffing capacity bullet point here is essentially a message to our legislature. They love to see this. They love to see that the program seems to be beneficial in terms of a cost benefit perspective. So they are increasing the amount of money that is being given out to the programs, but they are not increasing the amount of money that our agency receives to staff and administer these programs and do the data collection and evaluation. So we're hoping to get that message across to our policymakers. And this is our last slide here. This is just additional information that we have in the full report that's available online. Our pandemic impacts section was a qualitative piece. We have more information about why people are not eligible for the programs. We have more information about the participants that are participating. As I mentioned, we have information from the participants themselves about what they think about the fairness of the programs. Much more information about recidivism in terms of what kind of new offense was it? Was it a violent crime? Was it a property crime? Was it something fairly minor? Some additional recommendations and technical analyses in the appendix. And so with that, I again just want to thank JIRN for the opportunity to be here today and sort of share what we do with others and learn what others are doing that is beneficial for us as well. And just give a shout out to our entire team at our SAC. This report was kind of an all hands on deck project. Everyone in our SAC kind of did a piece of it. So with that, I'm happy to end here and just say thank you.
Ashley, thanks so much. And I want to acknowledge all of the award winners. The bar keeps getting higher and higher, and these are all great reports or data dashboards. And again, please keep in touch with JIRN as recommendations in these reports or lead to policy or legislation. We're always interested in that. So we are at the end of time, and I'd like to remind people to take the survey. We really make use of that information to plan future events. Right now, many of the abbreviated presentations you heard in the last hour and a half will be featured in upcoming brown bags. Be on the lookout for those. We'll get the other ones that we haven't scheduled done so in the immediate future. Please remember to take a look at the event calendar on the JIRN website. Most of the events are free and open to all. A few are limited to members. So again, I just want to really thank everyone for coming out for this conference. I recognize that it's been a long 2 days, and but the information presented was tremendous, and I think it points to the value of statistical analysis centers. And I want to just, from me personally, just thank all of you for what you all do. Data does matter. Thank you so much. And remember the survey, please. Thank you, everyone.